Welcome to the Grange podcast, where we strive to rekindle the spirit of community and belonging. Our mission is simple yet profound: to foster transparent communication and share valuable information that brings us closer together. Join us as we explore stories, insights, and conversations with the intent of building a stronger, more connected community, one episode at a time. Today, my guest is Mike Jutila. Mike is a husband, father, grandfather, coach, teacher, and small business owner. Mike got his start in construction right out of high school, building his first custom home at the age of 19. He first found a love of discipline through competitive swimming, ultimately leading him to compete as a bodybuilder for over 14 years. On top of running his own construction company, Mike also owned the Colville Fitness Center and has held numerous coaching positions for Colville High School over the last 30 years. Quick update on streaming platforms. The last 4 episodes I have published to YouTube and Spotify. Last week, I figured out how to publish to Apple Podcasts. So anyone using an iPhone has the Apple Podcast app. And if you search the Grange podcast, you'll be able to find all of the episodes up to date. And then anyone using Spotify, you can find episodes there as well. And I'll still continue to upload to YouTube. The reason I mention that is I know that I have some listeners that are older that have just been tuning in on YouTube, which is great. But if you guys are, looking to listen outside of your house and maybe stream to your car on your ride to work or whatever, you can have someone help you with either the Spotify app or Apple Podcast app if you wanted to listen outside of your home. Also, on any of those platforms, there should be a subscribe button. And if you click that subscribe button once, it will notify you every time a new podcast is published. I'm sticking with my original goal of trying to publish 2 episodes a month. Once I can get some traction, I'd like to increase that. But for now, we're going to stick with 2 episodes a month. Being that I'm trying to build some community and transparency here through this podcast, I thought it was worthwhile mentioning, just a shout out to Clark's All Sports. Mike and I, at the beginning of our conversation, talk about Gary Clark a little bit and the impact that Gary had on Mike as a fellow swimmer. But I was on my lunch break yesterday and read the paper and read that Clark's All Sports will be closing, I think after 48 years in business. And so I just wanted to take this time and say thank you to the Clark family, to the employees. That business was such a huge staple to this community for so long. I remember being a young kid going in there and getting all my sporting equipment, in the snow, skis and snowboards during the winter. That was just awesome. Tim Nizick helped me so much at the gun counter there throughout the years. And just that small town family owned business was incredible. Very thankful that I got to experience that, and I'm happy for the Clark family, and I hope that Ray and Julie can find joy in retirement, and the kids, also find joy in what is in their next chapter. But just wanted to say thank you to them and for providing a great business to this community for the last almost 50 years. And then, like always, guys, anyone that is interested in coming on to the podcast can reach out to me personally or to thegrangepodcast@gmail.com. That's all I have for now. Thanks for tuning in. Now, here's my conversation with Mike Jutila. So I just realized that I said Gary Clark was the influence for Mike Jutila swimming. Correction, that is Ray Clark. My apologies. It's 0 degrees out. I'm freezing and my brain's not working right. So I don't know how to edit that out. So I'm just going to add that real quick. Ray Clark was someone that Mike had swam with. So yeah, there's some redneck editing for you. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks. Masculinity, first and foremost, ought to be defined in terms of relationships. It ought to be taught in terms of the capacity to love and be loved. If you look over your life, at the end of it, life wouldn't be measured in terms of success based on what you've acquired or achieved or what you own. The only thing that's really going to matter is the relationships that you've had. It's going to come down to this. What kind of father were you? What kind of husband were you? What kind of coach or teammate were you? What kind of brother were you? What kind of friend were you? Success comes in terms of relationships. And that is a quote from the book, Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks. I first read Season of Life when I was 15. That same year, I began to build a relationship with Mike Jutila, who owned the Colville Fitness Center. Mike became a mentor to me and was the first person to introduce me to lifting weights and nutrition. And today, I'm honored to have Mike on the podcast. Mike, welcome to the Grange.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Me too, man. Appreciate you making the time. So my dad bought that book for me for Christmas. So I was 15 and a half. And it's still one of my favorite books.
I just reread.
I actually have it right here.
I just reread that last year, right? For probably the third time that I've read it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's awesome.
I did too. I just had reread it last year and probably hadn't actually picked it up in 10 years.
Yeah.
And pulled so much valuable information from it. And at the time, I'm trying to reflect back when I had read it at 15. And I remember it had an impact on me, but I don't think my brain was fully developed to understand the true message in it. Mm-hmm. I remember when I read it thinking that I wanted to be part of a program like that. Having, leadership and maybe to our listeners who haven't read the book or know what we're talking about. Essentially, the author of the book was a ball boy for the Baltimore Colts and developed a relationship with one of the offensive linemen, Joe Ehrman. Yep. And later in life, Joe became a high school football coach, and the author, Jeffrey Marks, ends up reuniting with him and following his football team for a season. And Joe's big foundation that he coaches off of is a program called Building Men for Others. And it's basically teaching young boys to become men through the game of football. And so I read this at 15, and like I said, that listening to Joe's words in here, which that quote that I read was actually a quote that Jeffrey pulled from Joe. And I just remember thinking, man, that's awesome. Because at that time, I'm a sophomore in high school. I'd actually earned a varsity position my freshman year on the football team. And football that's all I did. I lived and breathed and did everything football. And I wanted to become great, and I wanted to put the work in, and I didn't exactly know how to do that. And I think that my dad has always been very supportive throughout my life, and he saw my work ethic, and I don't think he exactly knew how to point me the right direction because I was ready to work. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was running into some hurdles in Kettle Falls with just being able to get in the weight room. And like I said, I wanted to get in and put the work in. And I don't know how well you guys knew each other at that point, but I remember he said, hey, I know a guy that owns the fitness center in Colville. His name's Mike Jutila. And he said, let me talk to him and see if I can get you guys linked up. And I kind of remember at 15 being like, I don't know, that sounds terrifying. But, anyways, he must have reached out to you. Whatever. I remember being 15, I didn't have a driver's license, and it was kind of a pain to come in. And so we lived in Senior Subdivision in Kettle Falls, and I had a Polaris 250 Trail Boss 4-wheeler, and I would ride that 4-wheeler up to Heights, which is now Harvest Foods, and the Gold Line bus would pick me up there, and then I would ride it into Colville. I forget where it dropped me off, a block or two off of where the fitness center was, and then I'd go work out with you. And
Yeah.
that was my first recollection of meeting you, and that was 20 years ago. And I feel like we've crossed a couple times. You coached my brother in football,
Right.
and did a remodel for my parents, but have knowing you, for the last 20 years in different capacities. But I guess I should start, with just saying, man, at 15, you were a huge impact in my life. Like I said, I didn't know what I knew what a weight room was. I didn't know how to use one. I really knew nothing about nutrition. And I was terrified to go into Colville and meet some guy I didn't know. But I just remember being in that gym. I remember, I think, would it have been maybe Ryan Burdine's jersey was up there?
Yeah.
You had a couple of framed jerseys.
Yeah, I had quite a few, actually.
And I think Burdine was the only one that I'd recognized,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
I just remember thinking, man, that's cool. And just telling me what you were doing. But I guess I just wanted to start with our listeners of how you and I first met and going back to that. But also what I like to do with all of our guests is just kind of start back where you started from, with your early life, childhood, and maybe just give us some introduction on yourself.
Yeah, and then I'd like to actually come back to that Joe Ehrman deal, because there's a little that was instrumental in my life too, as far as being exposed to the whole season of life.
Yeah.
and the program that we ended up built off of some of those components.
For sure.
I grew up in Colville. I went to school all 12 years in Colville. Played sports. I was a competitive swimmer. My sister and I started swimming when we were 8 years old. And that's kind of where part of the foundation of a work ethic and a schedule and that. And at that time, Ray Clark was, when I was 8 or 9, Ray was about 18 or 19. And for people who know Ray, he's, in his 70s now. And Gary, his son, in fact, we have a swim team picture. And it's funny. I'm about 9 years old. My sister's 8. Gary Clark is a baby in diapers in front of the team picture. It's just, those connections. But that was really instrumental for me. And I had to, my sister was a natural swimmer. I was one of those guys that wasn't competitive unless I was in the top of my age group, but I was like fiercely competitive.
Yeah.
So, that, and, just the typical stuff, Little League and,
If I'm going to pause just real quick. It's funny you mentioned Ray Clark. Literally today on my lunch break, I got a copy of the Statesman Examiner, and the front page was that Clark's is closing down.
Right.
And I read that article, and I've known the Clark family my whole life, just from going to Clark's and doing the whole thing. I had no idea that, I believe it said that Ray was a collegiate swimmer or diver. He was a diver.
Yeah.
And I guess when I think of, Kettle Falls, Colville athletics, I never think of swimming or diving. But, and then for you to mention that you began your athletic experience swimming, is that still a thing, or was,
Yeah.
do you guys have a swim team?
Yeah, there's a swim team. In fact, when he actually combined Mike Graves and Joe Graves from Kettle swam, and then then we combined. They swam. I don't think there were any other Kettle kids that I recall, but they were both good swimmers. And then we combined with Deer Park, and Dr. Snook, Mike Snook, and his brother both swam on the swim team. And there were several others from Deer Park.
Wow.
That later ended up having like Mike Snook was a well-known physician in town, retired now, but anyway, it was a big deal. It was a real big deal. And that at that time it was AAU. Now it's a Canadian affiliated.
Okay.
But it was AAU, and we were a summer team, unheated pool, and so we have these year-round teams from Spokane and Moses Lake and Pasco or Tri-Cities, and so the first part of the season was kind of rough. We're trying to get in shape, and we're freezing our rear ends off, in the pool, and so the first part of the season we weren't too competitive, but again, back to my sister. At the same time, we're lucky most of the team is lucky if it's making the finals in the beginning of the season. My sister's dominating in whether she was in the top or the bottom of her age group. She'd win the high point for the whole thing.
Wow.
She was if she had, I always thought, if she had my drive, she was just a fish, and it was just amazing actually to watch. But anyway, that was kind of my early start athletically. Weight wise, how I got into lifting weights was that when I was a kid, my dad was the meat department manager at Safeway.
Okay.
And so through the years, several guys, he always had like a high school kid that worked for him. And there was a Colville kid named Jeff Brannon, who later went on to own the Stay Fit health clubs in Spokane. There was like 4 of them, I believe. So he got into it pretty big, and that was later bought out. And I think now they're, I think the Move Fitness Centers are the, hand or the, I don't know what you'd call that, but anyway, he used to own that chain. But he lifted weights with my dad when he was in high school. And so I just, for some reason, I was always kind of enamored with it. I always thought, and so then when I was in high school, I got into lifting. And then, then I had a little period after I went to trade school where I was, I didn't really lift anything other than 12 ounces at a time, kind of a deal. Then I got back into it. And I, I guess I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but, I decided I was going to go into the gym, and there happened to be a Muscle and Fitness magazine sitting there with Muhammad Ali on the cover which is kind of weird anyway. Muhammad Ali on a Muscle and Fitness magazine was kind of different, but I was like the hugest Muhammad Ali fan growing up. And so I picked it up because of that, not really knowing. I just wanted to see what, the article. I said, hey, could I borrow this? And yeah, and anyway, it just totally caught my imagination. There's pictures of Arnold and Franco Colombo and all these guys, not to get all into that, but it was the start of, 6 months later, I entered my first contest, which was really premature, but it was kind of on a dare kind of a deal. But
how old are you when you grabbed the magazine?
I was about 23, I think, something like that.
Okay.
But so that was in 1980. And then I competed until 94, I believe, which is a long time for a bodybuilding career. But so it was that. And so all of that led to, it tied into me owning my first gym. And then I started training a kid that was Brandon Lalone, who I knew his dad. In fact, his dad was the owner of that first gym that I went into. And he was a collegiate wrestler, national champion collegiate wrestler. And so anyway, Brandon is coming into the gym, and I'd known him since he was a little kid, so I'm keeping abreast of what's going on with his wrestling. And so what happened was that he would bomb out at the end of the season. He'd just dominate during the season. And then as they get into districts or regionals, he'd flame out. And so after his junior year, he dominated all year, same thing. And so I'm watching this, and I was really into the whole nutrition thing and understood dehydration and all that. And so in my mind, I'm going, hey, you know what? I don't know jack about wrestling. but I do know how to get in somebody's head, and I know about training and diet. And so I just said, hey, what's your goal? He says, to place at state. And I said, well, he said, I will all but guarantee you that if you, and I'll take you under my wing, you got to do everything I say, and you can't suck weight. I'll have you, within striking distance.
Yeah.
When the first match is there, you're going to be ready, and you'll just have to watch what you eat that day, but no dehydration. You have to agree to that. So anyway, he did. And the only thing, and so to flash forward, he dominates all year long, makes it to the finals at state. So he ended up placing second. And the only thing I couldn't get him to do was to raise the bar to win state, or I have no doubt that he would have.
Wow.
So anyway, that, that year he shows up for practice, and even though I was a jock, I had no designs on coaching. I never thought about coaching team sports. I was training people individually. I'd done a lot of that. So the wrestling coach at that time, Monty Jones, calls me up. Second day of practice, he says, I don't know what you did. I don't know what you did, but this is like amazing. The difference in his mentality and his just physically, he's just, he said, I want you to do that with everybody. So I got kind of sucked into the wrestling program, which was kind of weird because I wasn't a wrestler.
Okay.
And so anyway, that kind of took on a life of its own. I mean, I did that for a few years. Then, not to get into it, but Monty wasn't the coach anymore. And it was kind of up in the air who was going to be the coach. And so nobody's stepping up. So I wake up one morning, I'm like, you know what? I can do that. I mean, I can manage this,
Yeah.
And so I do. I apply. I get the job. So it's supposed to be just an interim deal. And so we were successful. We kind of get past some of the stuff that was going on. And my goal was really to get the focus on the kids, not on who the coach was and all that. And so then I end up getting coach of the year. So then they want me back. And so it just kind of took on a life of its own. Then I get recruited into football, which brings me to another book. And I think it's cool that you brought up. I mean, I had no idea what you were going to, lead into this with a book, but Randy Cornwell had gotten the head football job. And so he had a short list of guys that he wanted to approach. And back to Ray Clark. Ray Clark said, hey, if I was you, I'd make sure I'd recruit Mike, because he has a lot to bring, strength wise and conditioning and that kind of stuff, the mental part. So he asked me, and I'm like, man, I can't. I'd love to. Football was my sport, but I would really love to, but I'm doing wrestling, and as it is right now, I'm leaving the gym at the busiest time of the day, the busiest time of the year. I'm walking out the door, and so, I mean, I just can't. So at the time I'm reading this book called The E-Myth, and I can't think of the author, but it's the E-Myth is about the entrepreneurial myth. And the idea there is that, briefly, most people who go into business are like a mechanic or a carpenter or a whatever, and their dream is to own their own business. But really what they end up doing is buying a job.
Yeah.
I mean, they're working harder than they would have ever worked if they were working for somebody else, and they're not making any more money.
For less hourly.
Yeah. So his whole deal was systems, developing a system so that you delegate. So I learned a ton about delegating. And so in just a short period of time, from the time he asked me to coach and the time the football season rolled around, I'd kind of dove headfirst into this, developed some systems, got to where I felt like, hey, you know what? I can do it. So I went to him and said, hey, I would like to coach. And he said, well, I already filled that position, but I'd love to have you coach still, but it would have to be on a voluntary basis. And that's really where that whole thing started. And not to get into it, but really it brought during his head coaching tenure, Colville football became a program.
Yep.
And we were pretty much joined at the hip. We were kind of partners in the whole development of a culture and, the whole thing that you were exposed to.
Yep. And
Cameron was exposed to. And it was really like magic. We had just an awesome staff and, and we really had that edge. We were constantly looking for ways of developing the team. And, to go back to this book of Joe Ehrman's, we were exposed to things, I was really into the John Wooden deal, John Wooden's whole, yeah. You got the book right there. He was just awesome, and his philosophy was, super solid, and so I remember the very first time I was exposed to Joe Ehrman, and I can't remember for sure if that's where your dad even heard about the book, and there's a possibility that it was, but there was a special on HBO with Brian Gumbel.
Yep, I remember those.
Well, they had this feature on the most important coach in America. Well, Joe Ehrman wasn't even the head coach. He was an assistant coach.
Yeah, Biff was the head coach,
Biff
right?
was the head coach.
Okay.
And so anyway, they show the team gathered around this coaches. Joe Ehrman's talking to the team and he says, "What's my job?"
To love us.
To love us. What's your job?
To love each other.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is, I'm throwing stuff at Randy, like totally getting him out of his comfort zone. And we're doing everything we can do to grow as men, which was right in the, target of this. And we were best friends, our wives. And, we used to go out and do stuff, go to dinner. And so we were going to dinner and I recorded that. This is back in the VCR days.
Yep.
I record that episode. And I said, "Hey, before we go, come in here. I want to show you something." And this is kind of a crude way of putting it, but he watched that. And when they said to love each other, or your job is to love us and, love each other, I swear I could hear his rear end pucker, just that uncomfortable, because, we're kind of brought up to be macho. And
I remember the first time I read it, I thought, this is a little different.
It's out there. It really goes against the grain, but of what a real man is. But anyway, that was one of the components that we incorporated. In fact, I was checking the book out. That's why I opened this up, because your dad does everything 100%, and he got the whole team these books. And so I've got an autographed version of this.
Oh, cool.
That Jeffrey Marks signed.
Oh, wow.
He signed them all. So that was kind of awesome.
Cool.
You should tell your dad you should have got one of those.
I actually still have the original that he got me. He wrote a pretty nice message in my original, and it's at my house. I got so many things now that I want to ask, so we might be jumping back and forth.
Great.
Let's go back to high school real quick. You're a senior at Colville High School. What sports are you playing?
Well, to go back just a little bit further, I was a quarterback and a defensive, they used to call it a rover, basically a linebacker / defensive back. And my sophomore year, I started as a defensive player. And to be truthful, I was competitive offensively, but I didn't know my plays, so about 3/4 of the way through the season, I ended up winning the starting job. So I played finished off my sophomore year and my entire junior year as the starting quarterback. Didn't play defense then. And then my senior year, we didn't have football. And I believe Kettle was in the same boat. And Bobby Urhausen is the same age as me. Bobby U was in Kettle and I was in Colville. Well,
do you guys go to Chewelah?
No, he went to Chewelah.
Went to Chewelah, yeah.
He went to Chewelah. I had an opportunity to go to two different places. East Valley wanted me to come there. And then my parents' hometown was Mullen, Idaho. And their coach wanted me to come there. And and I didn't. I had a girlfriend and a job. And, I was always working if I wasn't playing sports. And so it was the probably if I had any criticism, and it's not really a criticism, but if I could go back and say, I wish my parents would have done this, I wish they would have made me do that.
Yeah.
Because I could have gone someplace else, played my senior year and came back and still graduated with my friends. And,
why did Kettle and Colville not have football?
Their levies failed
at the same time.
Yeah.
And so then that was the extracurriculars went out the window.
Yeah. But they pulled it together. By the time basketball rolled around, we had basketball, and I think Kettle had basketball, and we had baseball, but we didn't. So I lost my senior year, so.
Man, that's rough. I remember when I was a sophomore here, we'd failed 2 levies, and I might butcher this a little bit, but I thought I remembered that after the third, then you lose your extracurricular funding, essentially, which means sports go out the window. I just thought, there's no way that could ever happen. But you're sitting in front of me telling me that happened in the late 70s to both schools.
Yeah,
wow.
It happened. In fact, we were on the verge of that. I don't remember what year it was. They had a big rally at the park and all that stuff. And it was personal to me. I mean, I just, and I understand the politics of it and, all that stuff that goes on and taxes and everything. But being a kid who, obviously it wasn't important enough to me to move away to play.
Yeah.
But it was the thing I always wanted to be what I was doing, would be that guy, and so it was a big deal.
That's rough.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine losing a senior season.
Yeah.
When that's all you look forward to.
Yeah.
That's tough. I remember I've always heard the stories about Bobby U going and playing his senior year at Chewelah, but I never, for whatever reason, I guess had the curiosity to ask why he went there. But
that's why.
Yeah. Interesting.
And we had a kid named Charlie Yankus that was a phenomenal basketball player that was my age. And he went to Medical Lake.
Okay.
So he played at Medical Lake and then later went to Montana and played collegiate basketball. But he was phenom. And so anyway.
So you wrap up your senior year and then do you have a career path at that point? Or, you're 18 years old and you got your mind made up?
Oh, yeah. I had my mind made up a couple of years before I was going to. I had decided when I was probably a freshman, I was going to be either a contractor or an architect.
And how do you know that at 14?
I just had that interest in, building stuff, and
where was that exposure? Where were you getting exposure to building things and work and at that age?
Well, my dad was a kind of a do-it-yourselfer kind of a guy. So, I helped him put on a roof on our house when it was time to do that. And, a little bit later, I went to work for a guy that was a retired Marine guy that his wife worked for my dad wrapping meat at Safeway. And he used to, and I was just basically a gopher, a grunt, it was like, okay, Mike, you see this big pile of gravel, we need you to spread it around, and, or he needed another hand on something, and that's kind of my exposure. Then I went to work with Corky and Ron Palmer when they broke away from Dick Hurst. And, so by the time I was out of high school, I was already doing little side jobs, sidewalks and decks and, stuff, for people. And in fact, the house that I'm living in right now, Palmer's were remodeling and I was the third guy. And so my senior year, we were building a house also. And so I would just call them up and say, okay, where do you want me tomorrow? And they'd say, okay, need you out at Washburn's. And then they'd leave a list for what I was supposed to do. And so I would go out there and just fell in love with the place, but I was working by myself.
Wow.
And so anyway, I just, my senior year, I was, I wasn't exactly what we would call a scholar. I did get a 4.0 my senior last semester, but only because I had PE, PETA, woodshop TA.
Had the gravy schedule.
Drafting TA. Those were my 6 classes. So I was straight A's, which is pretty funny now that I'm a teacher. But anyway, I really liked the drafting.
Yeah.
And I was pretty good at it. So there were 3 of us there was a private school, architectural school in Arizona that came, and they were recruiting. And so you had to be in the top of your class to do that. So 3 of us got recommended and interviewed with these guys. I was the only one who was really interested, decided that I was going to go, but this was before the internet or emails or texts or any of that kind of stuff. And so I had made the decision, okay, I'm going to do it. And then the guy didn't call when he said he was going to call, and there were no answering machines or anything like that. So basically I just took that as the soft corner to say, okay, I'm going this route.
Yep.
So I didn't go.
Okay.
And again, it was the girlfriend deal and just the fear of, venturing out at that time.
That's
it was
a
just
real thing.
It was just an easy way for me to. So then I went to trade school at Spokane Community.
Was that for carpentry specific?
Carpentry and cabinet
Okay.
making. And
is that a 2-year program then?
It's a 2-year program. I only went 2 trimesters. It was a trimester kind of a setup. I only went to 2, and to be honest, it was just so basic that by that point
you'd already known most of that. School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, it was like I'd already had that experience, so that I spent a good part of my time in the weight room. Because as soon as we were done with the project, we'd be building these little miniature scale, we're working on the roof or the foundation or whatever. So your assignment's to do that. So I'd knock it out, and then I'd go to the gym, and so anyway, I went a couple trimesters, and then I came back and started my own thing.
So did you work, when you say started your own thing, like I
started doing the same thing I'd been doing, like on a little bit bigger scale. I partnered up with Roger Barton, and we were doing foundations and slabs. And
you're 20, 21?
I'm 19. 18.
Okay.
18 when I started doing that. So then ended up building my first custom house when I was 19.
Really?
Yeah. And that taught me a lot. I mean, I didn't know everything by any stretch of the imagination, nor do I think I still know everything. But it's kind of when I realized how important it was to be, if you're into something, you seek out the people who do know. If you don't have the answer, you seek it out. And so back then it was like Otto Reiner, and there was a whole host of people, the guys that I worked for, Palmer's, who were out of Dick Hurst line,
yep,
which Larry Lickfold, and those guys all worked for Dick Hurst, and so I could go to Ron and Corky anytime I wanted, or Otto was super nice, and then his sons, Greg and Jeff, were great guys, and so anyway, if I didn't know what to do, then like if I ran into something I was stumped on, I'd just go and tap into one of those guys, and they were always happy to help.
That's great.
And so it was awesome, and so I carried that same thing into my bodybuilding.
So not to be rude, but who hires a 19-year-old kid to build their house? I'm thinking right now, if I was to build a custom house and a 19-year-old kid comes up to me, he'd have to be pretty dang squared away.
Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly how that exactly worked out, but
But it did.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then
that's cool.
Yeah. So that kind of rolled into, and then I had some guys that back then, some of the younger contractors I knew and played softball with, and I, I was actually, I worked for Tim Buchanan for a period when I was still in high school. And then right after I was in high school, I worked for Greg Reiner and then went to trade school. And so in a short amount of time, I had a lot of exposure to different people, and so I guess that network kind of like, but, I probably wasn't the first choice, but anyway, to make a long story short, it worked out, and networking is just something that I've always believed in since then. Well,
if you can get a nod from some of those guys that are established here,
right.
If Larry Lickfold says, "Hey, Joe McBride squared away,"
right?
Absolutely, I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
So probably same thing.
Yeah,
you've established capital with these premier builders, and
exactly.
They're saying, "Hey, you should call Mike. He's dialed.
Yeah,
and so, whatever he doesn't know, we'll help out with."
Yeah. So
cool.
Anyway, so I was building for, I built quite a few houses, and then ended up having a bad one where it was an out-of-state couple who I was referred to them by Gotham Brothers, who were big realtors back at the time. And I'd done quite a bit of business with them and stuff. So they were, they were not averse to putting me out there, they took that chance. And by this time I was in my early 20s or, probably 22. So I built this great big monster house. And then, and this would take a whole podcast to tell the whole gory story. But anyway, at the end, I end up having to sue the guy. And it turns into a deal where I have to take him to court. He appeals, and the judgment was like, it would have been enough to pay the bills, that were out. But the whole time, the guy's saying, do whatever it takes, do whatever it takes. We got this deadline, which he sprung on me after we had started. And so we go through this whole thing. I pull in every guy that I knew to swarm this thing at the end to get him past this deadline. And I'm like, man, we're home free now, But I sweat blood for this guy. And the whole time he's setting me up. He's going, hey, don't worry. He said, you do whatever it takes. I'm going to take care of you. Well, I thought I'm going to take care of you meant he was going to take care of me, like opportunities, And so he's feeding me this, conning me. And, so I go up there to give him the final billing after this. A lot happened in a month. So I go up there to give him a billing, and the guy was a former accountant on top of everything. So I let him, he said, I want to take care of paying the bills and da-da-da. So I said, hey, great. I can focus on building. So I would just give him a bill, and everything was hunky-dory. So until the last billing. And so then he says, okay, I'm not going to pay you anymore until you tell me exactly where we're at. And I go, well, that shouldn't be a problem. You got, just give me the information. And, he goes, well, we went over the original price. And I'm like, really? This thing, went from, it wasn't even the house that we started out with.
Yeah.
It's got a dark room and sauna and, wood electric heat that was added. The whole basement was completely finished. And this was a big house for back then. And I thought he was joking. I literally thought he was joking. So anyway, the thing turns into a nightmare. And that's when I went back to the gym. And it was more from my mental health than anything else.
So you're stressed out. You got all this
totally
stuff on
stressed.
the table, and you're saying, how do I get right between the ears? And you find home in the gym with that.
Yep.
Okay.
It was either that or become a full-blown alcoholic.
Yep.
Because I was pretty good at partying at that time.
Yeah.
So it was like, so the gym was kind of my sanctuary. And then I got into bodybuilding, and it kind of took on a life of its own again, with that. And
so how long before you pick up the magazine with Muhammad Ali are you being consistent in the gym? Like years or months?
Oh no. I'm that is literally probably the second day I'm back in the gym.
Wow. And so you pick up this magazine.
I pick up this magazine. Lalone owned it was back then it was called the Body Clinic. And it was just it's where Body and Soul is now.
Yeah.
The gym that I owned when you came in, I owned that for about 20 years.
So it's that's where you started? It's
that's where I started.
Okay.
But the whole thing was most of the building it was an old grocery store. And so a lot of it was warehouse. The upstairs was completely unfinished. The whole back was just like freight kind of a thing. So he came in on a shoestring, put in a little locker room, bought a line it was called Mini Gym. So it was a little circuit type of deal. He had a few free weights that he kind of scabbed together. And then he had actual shifts. So it was like this, from 8 to 9 is men, from 9 to 10 is women. And it kind of went back and forth like that. So it wasn't co-ed.
Okay.
There was only one locker room and it was small. It was nothing like the scale of the building is now. And so anyway, I went in there and started working out. And the second day that magazine was there and I'm like, hey, can I borrow this? And then it was like, probably 3 weeks later, we were in the sauna and he's like, yeah, there's a contest in Spokane. He says, I'll enter it if you will. And I go, well, I don't even know anything about it other than I think I saw one on Wide World of Sports or something, And so the next thing I know, I'm like, hey, I'm in, how do we do this?
In 6 months, you're in competition.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that 6 months leading up to it? How much research are you doing?
I was like, I went through and anytime I'm into something, I kind of immerse myself in it. So I was reading everything I could read, but at the same time, I was still conflicted. I was reading, one book would be about low volume, high intensity. And one book is like, 5 hours in the gym kind of stuff, massive numbers of sets and that kind of stuff, So, I wanted to be good. And so I'm drastically overtraining, at the time, but still, kind of just the will to do it was overriding that. Plus I got back everything that I'd gotten from trade school and high school, that muscle snaps back. It has a memory, so that part I got right back, but I was in, no way that I was, ready to compete,
What kind of physical transformation did you see in those 6 months?
Well, I put on I was in good shape. I got a little leaner, although I wasn't heavy at all back then, but I was, I got leaner, pretty, I wouldn't say I was cut, but I guess I was cut. I wasn't, what in bodybuilding vernacular, I wasn't ripped or super defined. But I had a lot of weaknesses still that so in fact, a friend of mine helped me put together the first kind of posing deal that I did. And you had like 1 minute you went out there. And so basically I just it was super basic, but I didn't do anything that exposed my weaknesses. But, as I went along, so I did that initial one. And then it was, instead of being, kind of the way my brain works, instead of being defeated or going, oh man, that's embarrassing. You did crap, you got your butt kicked. I was like so motivated, and it was like that every time I competed. The next day, the hardest thing for me to do was let my body recover for a week. I was writing down notes and, kind of trying to learn from my mistakes and figuring out, okay, what body parts do I need to bring up and all that kind of stuff, And so then so that was kind of the story of my whole career and then getting smarter about it, So
was that that obsession almost that you speak of? It's hard for you to take the week off. You're writing down, the weaknesses and what you need to do for strengths. Reflecting back now, what was that? Is that relationship healthy? Right? Because that's something that I'm trying to navigate in my life, is that sometimes it's easy to be extreme. And I don't mean that then the nature, it's hard to go to the gym. It's hard to lift the weights. It's hard to do the meal plan, but it's almost easier to be extreme than it is to be balanced.
Yeah.
And right now I'm like trying to find this balance in my life, because when you're extreme, it comes at a cost too. You're not at home. You're not doing maybe things that you should be doing, whatever they may be. But I'm just curious now, looking back on that, was it an obsession, or do you think it was a healthy relationship that you had with that?
I would say it probably wasn't the most healthy thing in the beginning, but because of that very same thing, I learned how to compartmentalize, and again, that was probably my first, before I read that book on systems and, that kind of stuff, I had figured out that, hey, you know what? I just need to do what I got to do. And I started working out early in the morning, so nobody was even up. So I wasn't taking anybody's time away from them. I still had to do some cardio in the evening and, that kind of stuff, but it wasn't severe. And I worked all along, my wife was, she's always just been a saint with that kind of stuff, and later on with football was the same deal. I mean, I was just as obsessed, or, if you want to call it, I hesitate.
Passionate?
Passionate.
Yeah.
Passionate. I felt that edge. It was like, it's like, if you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah.
Don't fiddle around with it.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at that. That's why I got out of coaching for a period too, was that I was spread too thin. And there was that part of me that from the time that I quit competing until I could focus on one thing, but I was still trying to run toward comfort, and normal, whatever that is, normalcy, and, and trying to, keep a balance. But I thought the answer was pulling back and not being into anything, really into it, but football, I mean, like right now I'm 68 and I feel better than I probably felt in 35 years, literally.
You look good.
I feel.
I haven't seen you in a while, but you look.
Yeah.
You look good.
Yeah. I'm in shape. I'm strong and working out with my grandson, who's 14, almost 15, but awesome workout partner. One of the best workout partners I've ever had, and I went through a lot of them.
Yeah.
And but he's just a sponge. Asks really good questions, and I'm just challenged, to see what I can do. It's not like, and our workout is, over the years evolved. So I don't do anything stupid. But it is a low volume, high intensity approach that I totally believe in, and and so. The problem that I had wasn't that I didn't keep working out, but my diet was, I could never get my diet really together after I had the fear of, when you're competing, it was easy because the fear drove you.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I was driven, but I was also, it was like bodybuilding is a sport that you can't fake it. You can't, you're not just putting on a uniform and going out there and, you can't blame it on anybody. It's you. Yep. And you're saying, judge me.
Yeah.
So if you didn't do your homework,
it shows.
And it shows, and you're going to get judged either way. So, but I developed this balance. I did manage to develop that balance, and I focused on my family. And so in this, I'm kind of bouncing around here a little bit, but when I was coaching, which was for football was like 19 years, I think. And now I'm coaching again, but, I kind of pride myself on the fact that I was really into it. Really focused on helping build that program and bought in. But when I came home, my wife or my daughter didn't know whether we won or we lost, or if we had a good practice or a bad practice. So I was able to leave it there.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. And so that was healthy.
Yeah.
So that's how I, and obviously that's just, like you're saying, that's a struggle.
Yeah.
It was, and I wouldn't say that I don't want to make this sound like, man, I had it.
For sure.
I had it
Understood.
dialed.
Yeah.
Everyone
has days.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it was just my wife is just totally, I can't.
Just your
she's
rock. Yeah.
Totally supportive. Totally, she knew I was into it, but I really did do a pretty good job of not bringing it home.
Yeah.
My daughter literally never knew,
Yeah.
nor did she really care, but.
So there's, like I said, there's a handful of things I really want to get into, but just still sticking on the chronological order of things. You're competing. How long? Excuse me. How long did you compete for actively? How many years?
I competed. The first time I competed was in 1980, and the last time I competed was in 1994.
Okay.
And most of the contests that I competed in, I was kind of chasing this Rocky Mountain States was the big contest back then. And so that's what I was entering. And it took me a little while to really be competitive. So I watched, I always call it watching the contest from the stage. There were times when I wasn't really competitive, and then I kind of hit my stride. And, there was a time when there was always that part of me that was going, because that typical bodybuilding career is short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys who compete once or twice, and it's just not something there's no longevity in it for most guys. And, and part of it is they just need to grow up and get on with life, I guess, you know? And so I realized early on that that's what I wanted to do. That's what I felt like I was. And, so all this is pre-coaching, by the way. That literally I stopped the year that I started coaching. I was going to enter a contest. And then for the first time, my priority shifted from, bodybuilding is an individual thing. It's like wrestling, wrestling has a team component too. Bodybuilding doesn't have a team component. Yeah. And so I started coaching, and then that first year, we had a game the same day or the Friday before the contest that I was going to enter. And I just decided, hey, you know what? I just found like, I felt like that, my calling at that time shifted, all of a sudden my calling, even though it was unplanned, was that I had an ability to connect with kids.
Yep.
And I was more interested in their success than I was in me competing. So I stopped.
It's time for a new chapter.
Yeah. So it was a new chapter, and I kind of turned the page. And
what year did you buy the fitness center?
Let's see, what year was that? I think that was around 90. I didn't actually buy it right off the bat. I came in there. There had been a change in ownership, and the previous owner was Tim Buchanan, who I mentioned earlier that I worked with, who was actually when I started my first gym, Mike Lalone owned what at that time was called the Body Clinic, and this is going back a little way.
Mike Lalone from here?
Yeah, from here.
I know Mike.
Yeah. He's the one that started it. Okay. Then he took on a couple partners, and this is about the time that the racquetball was really big. And so Tim Buchanan was one of the partners, and then a guy named Scott Lowry, who was an attorney in town, and they became partners. And so then they renovated that entire building, restructured it to accommodate 3 racquetball courts. They put in 3 racquetball courts and an aerobic room, because aerobics were huge at the time. Bill Ferguson bought it from Tim. Mike ended up stepping aside I mean, he got out of it because it was just getting too, I don't know if it was, I wouldn't say it was too rich for his blood, but it was kind of going a direction that he didn't really want to go. And so it ended up being Tim and Scott, and then it ended up being just Tim. And, you know, at that time, that was right around the same time that I was going through this lawsuit deal, and really, and then I decided, hey, I want to change gears here. You know, I'm kind of interested in starting a gym. You know, so a couple years after that lawsuit deal is when they're going through this remodel, and they asked me to get involved, and I said, no, I'm going to do my own thing, because I kind of had a picture. I wanted a gym, not a health spa type of thing. You know, I didn't want any frills or anything like that. So I start this gym, and so anyway, I was competing. At the time I was competing, and then I sold out of that gym and was back at building. And so I built most of the time I owned the gym. There were a few years where I did exclusively the gym, but in both cases, both gyms that I owned, I still worked. I still did construction. So anyway, it was funny because I had turned that page. I was back building, and I'm building the house. And I run into Tim. You know, he'd ended up getting the gym back, and I run into him at we were out for dinner, and he said, hey, you know, he says, I'm kind of blind. You know, I ended up with the gym back. I'm living in Mukilteo, you know, over on the coast, and Bill was in Spokane, and so it was sold on a contract, and it was kind of dumped back in their laps. The people walked. And so he says, I'm in a bind. You know, he says, I wonder if we could get you to take a look at this thing. And so I kind of came in as a consultant more than anything. I said, yeah, I'll take a look at it and see what I think you can do, and you know. And it was like the Titanic on the bottom of the ocean at the time. So I start looking at it. You know, I go in there, and I'd work out, and then I just walk around, and I start looking at it and kind of just running different plays. And at that time it was really closed in. It was, you know, 3 racquetball courts, but the hallways and the stairwell and all that was, you know, the open concept wasn't the thing when that was remodeled. And so anyway, I could start coming up with ideas. And so I meet with them, and they go, and a lot of it was just the business end of it at that time. And so they said, well, hey, do you want to get involved? And I didn't even hesitate. I said, no, I don't, you know. I said, but I'll keep helping you. So the next phase was, okay, what could we do with the building? So then I start getting this picture in my head of what they could do with it, and, you know, re-equipping it, taking a racquetball court out and expanding the fitness, the weights part of it, you know, which was my thing, and expanding the cardio, because at that time it had an old Century stationary bike with a speedometer hanging off of it. I mean, it was just a joke, you know. And you know, but in their defense, it really wasn't the thing back then, but it was becoming the thing, you know. So I was kind of at the cutting edge of what was going on. Yeah. So anyway, I started getting excited about it, and so then I ended up, next thing I know, I agree to come in there and run it for them. So then it turns into a partnership, and then it turns into me buying them out and buying the building and all that stuff. And anyway, so most of the time that I competed, I didn't own the gym. So that was the end of my bodybuilding career, was more, you know, 90, 91, 92, 93. And there I was, I had finally won the Rocky Mountain States, and then was on this USA team that went to Russia, and we did some exhibitions and contests over there and stuff, and which was really kind of the highlight of my career, you know. Yeah. I mean, here I am, this kid from Colville, and well, actually, another kid that I went to school with was on the team too. So there were 10 guys on this USA team that competed in the European Championships, and two of the 10 from all over the United States are from Colville.
Wow.
The one kid, I mean, the other guy lived in Tri-Cities, so he wasn't from Colville at that time. But that's where I played baseball and football with him. He was my backup quarterback. You know, I mean, I'd give him a ride to school. You know, that kind of. So it's just bizarre. So, so anyway, that was a really cool. Ronnie Coleman, the guy that was, I mean, for anybody who knows anything about bodybuilding, knows that Ronnie Coleman was like an 8-time Mr. Olympia. He was the heavyweight. And it was pre-steroids. So there were 10 guys on the team. 5 of the guys were that year's Mr. Universe team, and it was drug tested. So at that time, Ronnie Coleman was still a freak. I mean, he was, just genetically, miles ahead of, anybody else. But
so my daughter and I this week, it was probably night before last, we're watching YouTube videos. And I actually pulled up some old Arnold videos, and she'd never seen Arnold in his prime. And I mean, it just blew her mind. And then so we went down the rabbit hole and hit Ronnie Coleman. But then I was trying to have the conversation with her of, steroids, supplements, the whole 9 yards. And I said, what's really sad is like Ronnie can't walk today.
Yeah.
And we pulled up some video footage of him in the last 6 months, and it's just, it blows your mind, right? I mean, this guy was just a behemoth, and now he's shriveled up in a chair and, can barely walk. And it's, and that's the side that you don't see very often, is the,
and that's the, that's really the kind of the thing that, any kind of training can be taken to an extreme. I mean, Ronnie Coleman really didn't need to do the massively heavy stuff that he did, or take the drugs that he took. I mean, the guy was a phenom anyway, and it's sad just that, that's what I consider an obsession.
Yeah, I agree.
When you're willing to risk your life, I mean, it's like, for what?
Yeah.
Title.
So that does lead me to one question though that just popped into my brain, with supplementation. So, I remember then getting my license, being 16 years old. I get hooked on working out with you at the fitness center, but then that transfers back to Kettle Falls. It then comes back. I work out with your football team again, but I'm in it, and I love football. I love working out, and marketing gets the best of me. And I realized that there's this little store called GNC, and roll in there with cash because I don't want to see, my parents can look at my debit card or whatever, and loading up on all of the craziest shit you could ever imagine. I remember I was taking like 8 horse pills a day of this. It was called like NO2. And then we're doing pre-workout and creatine and all this different whey protein. And like, I'm thankful that I've always been very in tune with myself, and doing that for like a month and a half, I was like, this isn't right. Like I don't even know what the hell I'm taking. And then also that whoever the guys that's selling a 16-year-old kid all this shit, like whatever, but that's half criminal in my opinion, looking back at it now.
Absolutely.
But what was when you were, hardcore in the competing days, what role did supplements play?
Not that much, to tell you the truth. I did later on, I took creatine, but I never, to go back to when I started, I had competed, I think 2 or 3 times before I had used a jug of protein powder, because I just, I was of the opinion that was a supplement. As long as you could, eat lean protein, you were better off to eat something that has to digest.
And was the math back then a gram of protein for muscle mass?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, per pound of what you wanted to
be? And which really is, I still don't think that that's a bad formula if you're really trying to put on muscle. It's not, as long as that gram per pound of body weight is spread out over the day.
Okay.
So for me, it was like spread over 6 meals. So I'm only taking in about 25 to 30 grams per meal of protein, which isn't a ton. I mean, really, it's not like you're sitting down and eating, 2 steaks or a whole chicken or anything like that. You're actually watching that. So I was more of a And still am today, really. I mean, this is maybe, the vain part of it is out the window for me, but I want to be as good as I can. I mean, I want to be as physically fit and be an example of what you can do at my age.
Yeah.
So I really, I train and I recover. I work on my recovery and my diet. And that basically is what guys take steroids for. I mean, the steroids are basically they help metabolize protein, help with, they're really
That's a faster recovery.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely a faster recovery. It's a recovery aid, so you can do more volume of work. And, so my deal for a long time has been a more limited number of sets, knowing what real intensity isn't necessarily being ferocious and how hard you can scream and yell and make a big scene and drop weights and all that stuff isn't intensity.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I guess it is a kind of intensity, but it's not the kind of intensity that produces results. So mine is more isolation, doing controlled, which is also the reason why I had a lot of longevity in the sport and don't have a bunch of injuries. I'm not all tore up because I figured out, if you're pushing the envelope like Ronnie Coleman, if you're pushing that envelope and you're not smart enough to back off and train around injuries and that kind of thing, you're doomed. You're going to have problems that last you a lifetime, basically. So my whole deal is just you do enough to stimulate the muscles. You're not trying to annihilate the muscles. Although some of our sets do seem like, pretty extreme because it's super intense. We want to go to failure, but we're only doing a limited amount. I mean, we're spending as much time, like our workout, we do a half hour of cardio and about an average of a half hour of lifting that includes abs. We do some stretching, we do some balance, we incorporate deep breathing into our cardio. So we do like an interval on the treadmill. And when we're walking, we're breathing. We're taking deep, full lung, full breath, blow it completely out, and as you get a little bit more exhausted, the hard part isn't sucking it in, it's getting it all out, so you have to kind of let it out and then, take a little breath to push the rest of it out. But man, I'll tell you what, it's like, so it's not like I'm ready to walk on a stage or anything again, but I'm super excited with just what, I'm capable of right now, and a lot of that is, it's diet. I'm no crap, doing cold showers and all that kind of stuff. Right now the sauna or the locker room's being remodeled, so we're not taking saunas, but Saturday kind of have this routine. We go in and do stretching, balance, abs, and then we'll sauna, cold shower,
Dude, so out there in the gym that we're in now, I have a cold plunge.
Oh, awesome.
And so I do it every morning.
Oh yeah.
39 degrees for 3 minutes. And it's the first 30 seconds, the endorphin hit that I get to my brain is incredible. And I've actually used it as a tool at the end of the day. If I have a really stressful day.
Oh yeah.
Like you said, when, you'd go home and your daughter didn't know if you won or lose, like I'm still working on that. And I've gotten a lot better at building that muscle.
Right.
The cold plunge helps me tremendously. If it literally feels like a reset on my brain, because I'll get spun out and stressed with work and this and that and all the things that everyone has to manage throughout the day. And then when I sit in that cold plunge, it literally feels like all I'm focusing on is my breath, because if you don't know how to breathe, you can't cold plunge.
Yeah, right.
You can get down to 50, 45. You start getting under 40 degrees, you better know how to belly breathe and breathe through your nose,
right,
and control your breath and be in tune with yourself, or you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. After 3 minutes, I get out of that thing, take a deep breath, and I'm like, all right, I'm good again. And so I've been cold plunging for about a year now, and it's incredible.
Are you doing that every day?
Every day. Well, 5 days a week. I haven't been doing it on the weekends, but we're working out as a crew 5 days a week, and I come in early and hit the plunge before our workout.
Sweet.
And then on a super crappy day, I hit it before I go home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not doing the cold plunge, but I'm doing the cold shower thing. And you know, and I don't know how much of it is, you know, I mean, I'm not even sure how they measure that stuff. You know, there's you know, a lot of supposed benefits.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's done on consecutive days, you know, there's benefits to, you know, I mean, your testosterone level increases, and, you know, the endorphins, and, you know, I mean, it's just like the, what do they call it? The cold is like a defense mechanism, but, and the same thing is true with the saunas. There's like a heat defense protein that's emitted, you know, and same thing with the cold. You know, there's all kinds of things, and all I know is that it makes you feel good.
It makes you feel good, and then to me, it's like making your bed in the morning. It's a mental win.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah.
Me and another guy that cold plunge in the morning. You know, we joke and say, "This is the toughest thing we'll do today."
Yeah.
You know, it gets easier from here, and you know, I'm sitting here laughing about you with it right now and saying, "Oh, I love it," and it's whatever. Tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. when I walk in here, I hope that thing's broke. It's so funny. Like,
I hear you.
I'll flip the thing open, you know, the lid, and then I'll end up checking my phone, make a pot of coffee, walk, and like I'll dodge it for 10 minutes, and then I'll just go do it, you know. But it's a mind over matter thing. But you start building that mental muscle that you can do hard things, and it transfers throughout the rest of the day. And I've really enjoyed building that muscle of saying, yeah, this sucks, but I'm going to embrace it.
And, you know, and really depending, I mean, you have to kind of pick your battles, I guess, but I would say the overarching thing that ties in with, and I'm always telling my grandson, everything ties together. It's, you know, the same rules that apply for business, family, and really, I mean, you know, not to get into faith, but, you know, but I am a Christian, and, you know, so and that kind of brings me to a deal on goal setting. You know, a long time ago, I listened to this. It was before podcast, but it was a tape set of Anthony Robbins, and so a lot of people go, "Oh yeah, Anthony Robbins," you know, and if you're not into that, you could say, "Hey, it's a joke," but that guy literally helped me quit drinking. You know, I mean, if you're training your muscle, your brain, you need to tap into people who are smart,
for sure,
and a heck of a lot smarter than me. And so anyway, he had this exercise that you did where you draw a circle basically, and then you turn it into a pie, and you can have as many categories as you want. You know, you can just make 4 or whatever, but you know, like typically faith and your family and diet or whatever, you know, business or whatever. So you have all these categories. And again, that's just an individual thing. But then the exercises that you go into each, the center of that hub is, the center of the circle is 0 and the outside is 100%. So you self-analyze where you are in each of those categories, and then you draw a line, you know, like say from 0 to 100. So let's just say you were doing really good in one area, you might be 90%, you know, of what you think of your potential. And then area you're struggling with, you know, so it's healthy on a couple points that you're self-assessing, you know, I mean, and you know what, you have to be honest with yourself. You know, we'd all like to put up this facade that we don't have any problems, or we don't have any, you know, any issues, or, you know, we're all, you know, I've always just been naturally a really good person and all that stuff, you know, and I kind of think that we're all flawed. And, you know, so anyway, so what you do is you draw the line where you think you're at in those places, then you shade in the middle part of it up to that line, from 0 to that line. So then you're supposed to look at that thing like a wheel. And so the idea is to get more balance, you know. So obviously, if you've got these areas on your wheel that are flat or really lacking, you can imagine that thing rolling down the road is going to be a bumpy ride. So I did that for quite a few years, in my goal setting for the year. And I thought it was pretty effective. And then our pastor said, man, that's awesome. We were talking about, doing something with some adults. And he said, but how about if, you're a Christian, why is just one of the pieces of the pie your faith? And so the difference was, instead of it just being one of the spokes or the, pieces of pie, it became the hub. So everything emanated from that, so God was in the center, and then everything comes off of that, so things like that have really made a difference for me, and kind of, even though I'm, some people would think I'm, call me a psycho or whatever, some of the stuff that I do, and why are you doing that at your age, and but, what I try to do is first things first. So the very first thing I do is, and for years, the very first thing I do is pray. And then after that, I do a devotional. So like right now, I'm actually doing a John Wooden devotional.
What's a devotional?
A devotional is like where it's kind of like a one, it's just the day by day thing, so like you get up and day one is, and there's a subject. And so this particular book, John Wooden, is just telling a story about, maybe his dad. So there's a little Bible verse, and then something that relates to that in, John Woodenese,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're familiar with John Wooden. And then one of his former players is a pastor. So one page is John Wooden. So he gives his little spiel, and it's just classic John Wooden. And then the next page, this pastor's kind of pulling it together. Well, this pastor played basketball for him, and he kind of ties it in a little bit more. And it's not a super Christian. I mean, it's definitely Christian. There's no question about that. But the idea is that each day you're kind of challenging yourself to, here's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to be that man that, we all struggle to be,
Mm-hmm.
step up,
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, for me anyway, Jesus is the helper, so like I know that I have weaknesses, so I kind of lean on that, and I wouldn't say it's a crutch, but my growth kind of emanates from that. So just that mere picture of God being at the center of it, and instead of it saying, me not putting him first, it's like I've got family and my health and all these different
Mm-hmm.
categories. And before it was just a category, just like everything else. So I don't know if that makes sense.
What was at the center before faith? Do you remember?
I mean, I've always had the faith, or I haven't always had, for a long time I've had the faith, but I didn't look at it like that.
Yeah, so I just thought.
So it was just part of the thing. It was who I was trying to be.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like I was saying, okay, first things first. What really am I saying is the core? If
So you
that's
kind of
really the core,
reorganized
it's just
the
a
board
reorganize,
and put faith at the center of it, and everything else.
Then
branched
everything
off.
else comes off of that. You know? And so everything, and I don't know, I would say that I'm more balanced, I'm probably more balanced right now. And part of that is not because of faith necessarily. It's because of just a kind of a reawakening to discipline, but the doing the devotional first thing is a discipline, I mean, you have to have some discipline there. You can't just, or like you talking about the cold plunge, those challenges, if you want to be a better person or a better man, you have to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just winging it, And so that's what I always tell my grandson when, I have a system for the working out, and we keep track of every single set we do, and we treat every single set we do like it's its own workout. We're not saving up for anything. We're not pacing ourselves. It's its own workout, and it will work no matter if you're doing multiple sets or just a combination set or a circuit or whatever you're doing. You have to know where you bend and know where you're going. So your goal setting every single set. And, you know, so we're not emotionalizing it.
Yeah.
You know, so that, and I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, is it's like, oh, how do I feel today? Oh, I didn't sleep last night, or, oh, I got back late last night because it's this or that. And you know what? It's those days when you get up and you didn't get to bed till late because of whatever your reason or excuse is, you get up and do it anyway, you know?
And I think for me, like I've been working out off and on for 20 years. I've always had a very tough time of being consistent. I've been roller coaster my whole life. And I actually in 19 went to the doctor and got blood tests done. Like I wasn't having huge issues. I knew I was overweight. I knew I was drinking too much. And so I think I was nervous that I was doing damage. And so I wanted to see if I was or not.
Sure.
And so I went in and weighed in at 265 pounds, and came back pre-diabetic. And so, like, I guess that wasn't as bad as I thought it could have been, but that was a wake up call for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that I was closer to 300 pounds than 200 pounds, like I wasn't okay with that. The pre-diabetic thing, I wasn't good with that. And so that kind of jumpstart me. I hadn't been working out for probably 10 years. You know, I mean, maybe a couple weeks a year. And I'd go hit it so hard that I couldn't move for 3 weeks, and then I wouldn't do it again for 6 months. And so, you know, came back, and that was kind of when keto was big, you know, on the scene. And so I actually did use keto for the first 3 months, just because I needed, you know, I think I'm similar to you in a lot of ways of I'm very disciplined, but I'm either 2 feet in or I'm 2 feet out.
Right.
And when I'm in it to win it. You know, I have the discipline to show up and do the work.
Right.
And so I started with that, but I literally started, and I think I heard it on a podcast, but I just started with 20 push-ups, 20 body weight squats, and 20 crunches because I couldn't do sit-ups.
Sure.
And I just started with that every single day. That was my new discipline. And then I would work up, you know, and I'd try to get 40, and I could only do 20 normal push-ups, and then I'd have to do 20 on my knees. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I did it every day, but I did it consistently. There wasn't a week that I didn't do it at least one day. And most weeks, I'm going to say I hit it at 4 days out of the week. You know, and some days I was doing 7, or some weeks I was doing 7, but I got like 2 years under my belt of and I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to go on a crazy workout thing. I'm not going to do whatever. It's 15 minutes. I do my push-ups, my squats, my sit-ups now. I went from crunches to being able to do a sit-up, and it's non-negotiable. And so I built that muscle that's my discipline, and that's what I'm doing. And now here in my business, we built this gym out in the shop, and we meet at 6 a.m. and we do workouts together as a crew. And we're 3 months into it, and it's the longest I've ever worked out consistently. You know, like, and these are hard. We're working out for an hour, and we're pushing ourselves. And to your point, when you said discipline, those like showing up when you don't want to, that's the majority of the mornings. Like when I get up, I still don't really enjoy working out, but I enjoy the discipline.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that more than saying that I slept in and missed a day, you know, like, and there's something that I've now started to learn with, this is the longest I've been consistent since high school, you know, I'm 3 months in. Usually by the time I get out of that cold plunge, and if it's not then it's the first 10 minutes of the workout, then I'm good. I just have to start.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, I'm very good. I'm like, I feel so much better. This was worth it. But I'm going to say 70% of the time, I don't want to come here, you know, in the morning. I still wake up at 4:30, and on the way in, I'm just like, ugh. But I try not to think about it anymore. I just try to make it my discipline and say, choose your suck. You know, it sucks to be in shape and it sucks to be fat. Choose your suck. You know, which one do you want to be? And they both come at a cost. And it's interesting. You know, I guess I went off on a little tangent there, but with the discipline thing,
stuff, though.
like it's huge, because I think a lot of people think that you get to a point that it just becomes easy and you just do it. But and maybe that's true, but I think discipline, to your point, is showing up when you don't want to. And then I'm stealing this, from a guy named Jocko Willink, but discipline equals freedom. And
Absolutely.
I have that flag at my gym at my house in the garage. It just says discipline equals freedom. And like, what a true statement.
Yeah. And I love his and I'm not, by no means no Navy SEAL. But that whole discipline and that cut the crap kind of a attitude. I mean, and he is really I wouldn't say a sensitive guy, but there is a sensibility to him that, is kind of almost shocking. He's not just a this animal.
Not a huge meathead.
Yeah, he's not a meathead. But he's basic. He's, I kind of look at it like the thing I appreciate about it is it's dumbed down. It's like, hey, you know what? Things aren't going good. Good.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that because it's like, there's so much in sports and in politics and all that stuff is all this. How much can you redefine the problem?
Yeah.
I'm teaching school right now and it's, and I work with some fantastic people, but I hate hearing about, well, before COVID, we didn't do this. Well, COVID was, how many years ago? You got to get over it
for sure.
And you got to readjust. That's the thing. That's the problem with a lot of this stuff it's just like everything. The ball gets rolling a certain way, a certain direction, and then it's hard to stop that thing and say, hey, that's what was necessary at this time. Now, we got to get back to what's, that is not working, and so that whole enabling victim stuff, I mean, that's like my, I hate that. I hate it so bad that it's not even funny, and, and so I like he's hardcore enough, but, it just makes sense to me.
He was kind of my Tony Robbins for you. Like when I first was introduced to his book, I felt like I spoke his language or I could hear his language. I didn't speak it at the time, but it was just so basic. And it was, like you said, it was kind of cut the crap. Yeah. And that whole extreme ownership or personal responsibility aspect.
Absolutely.
That gave me power. I was like, oh, I can change my situation. Yeah. I got to stop playing victim to the world and to everything else. And I have the keys. Yeah. Why don't I put them in the damn ignition? And so, yeah, I definitely credit him and some of his books and podcasts and all those things it was kind of this light bulb moment for me, of saying, okay, I have the keys, and then I had to go do the work. Right. Right.
Absolutely.
You can't, for so long, I was lost for like 5 years of just trying to find someone to give me the frickin' answer, just to solve it and drop and say, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. And if you take this, then you're going to be good. Or, and I don't mean take it in pill form, but just like give me life's answer. Yeah. And then when I first discovered Jocko, I was like, oh, take responsibility for your actions, have ownership. Check.
and quit BSing yourself. The honesty part of it is I really appreciate, and being honest with yourself. And, he isn't the only person that I listen to, or it's not like he's my guru or anything like that. It's just that he is super sound with what he's doing, what he says. And then that kind of led me to some different guys too, that just, and this takes me back to when I was competing. Whenever I had a chance, I read ferociously when I was doing that. And then I went to every seminar that I could. If there was somebody who I thought I could get something from, and you know what, I kind of adopted the attitude, well, some of this is just reinforcing, but if you go in there with your cup empty, if your cup's overflowing and you think you already know it all, you're not going to get anything out of anything because you already know it. You already know it, So I went into every one of those situations like, man, I hope I can come out of here with a pearl, like that one gem of an idea. And the worst case scenario is that a lot of this stuff just reinforced what I already knew, so, success leaves clues, and you've got to be smart enough to figure that out. So for me, the discipline part, just buying back into that for me, and not giving in to, oh, you're old or you're, I mean, that is just a crock.
How long did you take a break with discipline?
Well, I was disciplined. I was disciplined in certain areas, but I from the time I was competing, and I multitasked when I was competing because I had a gym business, a construction business, and I was competitive.
Yeah.
And really competitive. But I was able to balance it at the same time I was coaching. When I was coaching 3 sports for a period. I was coaching 3 sports, running a business, raising a family.
Yeah.
Also, was the youth, before they had a youth pastor at our church, I was the youth director, and going on mission trips and all this stuff. And so, and I've always kind of marveled at people who, like I'd be at a awards assembly at the high school or something at the end of the year, and I'm hearing all the stuff that this girl had on her plate, like she played 3 sports and she was part of this club and that club, and she was an A student and volunteered for this and that. And I'm going, holy crap, how did she do that? But the most productive times of my life were really when I was the most, 2 things. Whenever I've kind of got over myself and was more interested in helping other people, then the byproduct of that was, I benefited greatly from that.
Yeah.
The friendships and the relationships, like with your dad or, Randy or Tom Bassett or Bill Carpenter, all those guys. I mean, those are like, for me, it's like, that's kind of like a life well lived, but you can't sit back in that and go, oh, well, I'm turning the page. Now I'm going to be an old man, and that's kind of what I did. I was really literally more running towards comfort and almost like, well, how you are. If you get too into it, then, then you flip that switch and then you won't eat anything and
Yep.
And that's exactly what I was missing,
Yeah.
And so here I am. I've got inflammation all over the place, and I'm taking 2 leaves every single day, and wondering how come, and I just fought through it, but still, I felt my age. It was like, holy crap, I'm not Peter Pan anymore, and it was like, I don't know. It was so weird. It was just like a shift in my mentality. And the more I gave up crap and just said, hey, you know what? If it's not good for me, I'm not eating it. Not that I won't make an exception, but for the most part, it's like, and I would go as far as saying, if somebody wanted to do the same things, I mean, in their own scale, they don't have to be off the wall. I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to take cold showers and deep breathing and all that stuff, but you say, okay, what can I bite off here? You can turn it around.
Yeah.
And it is incredible, actually. And I'm, the thing that's really cool about it is that I have my edge back.
Yeah.
I mean, my edge is there. And I feel like, I feel like, what? Bring it on. I'm teaching school. I'm coaching football again. I'm working out. I'm doing cardio. I'm dieting. I'm, involved in my grandson's lives. And, and it sure as heck beats going to coffee, and wondering what I'm going to do today.
Yeah.
So
no, I can feel it from you, that edge thing. It's like, I can feel it. And so I think there's a huge message there. And for, people listening, there's a huge mindset shift, and you make up your mind because it's easy. And like, I don't hear you talking down or bad about anyone, but when you say like, I kind of had my mind made up, I was an old man, like that's easy to do, at whatever phase you're in your life, it's easy to say, oh, have a wife and kids and a business. You can always come up with something of why you're not. But then to your point of like, but you can also change your mind, and there's power in change. And I think you bring a good point when you say different strokes for different folks.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
You don't have to go torture yourself in an ice bath or be up at 4:30 in the morning doing a crazy workout, but do whatever challenges you and have that mindset. And I think that's an important message, right? And I think it gets beat like a dead drum because you can go to Barnes and Noble and read, check out 1,000 different motivational books. And I don't think that's what you're pushing at all. You're just saying real life experience. If you want it, go get it. It's there. You can achieve it. Yeah.
And really it's like, what's the motive, and that's what motivation is. Motivation doesn't last long. If you're just relying on external stuff, it needs to be like, hey, do some self-assessment, figure out what's important, what's really important to you. Yeah. Cut the crap. Don't tell yourself a story about what a good guy you are and how, I deserve this and that. And, all this stuff is like, challenge yourself a little bit, really, and that can be at whatever scale, but, it's like the difference between making my dad used to say, and this is kind of crude, and maybe I'll have you cut this out, but he used to say, you just wish in one hand and shit in the other one, see which one fills up the fastest.
Yeah, I've heard my dad say that.
That's an old school saying, sure. And it's true. It's like you can say, well, I wish this and I wish that, and boy, wouldn't it be nice? And, you're a decision away from making that happen. And I'm not talking about wealth and, stuff. I'm just talking about your health.
Well, I think that's one thing that I really realized during COVID was that my most valuable asset was my health. Mm-hmm. And I never understood that before. My health and time, right? And I can't buy time back and I can't get my health back to a certain degree,
right.
And I think that I was always under the impression of like, get ahead monetarily, make sure that you're safe, be able to retire, the whole thing. And when you're sitting at home, for me at COVID, not really knowing what's going on in the world, it's like, all I really need is time and health. And so I think when you said you got to figure out what your motivation is, that was the first time in my life that I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And what I realized when I did a self-audit was the things that bring me the most joy in life are the things that I'm doing with my body and typically outside, recreating on a dirt bike or a snowmobile or skiing, or swimming with my kids or whatever it may be. And I want to do that when I'm your age, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to use the word old, to be.
Yeah, age-wise, I am.
But when I'm 68, I hope I look like you, and I'm taking my 14-year-old grandson to the gym and doing sets with him, and that's huge, And I think I got to work at that right now to be able to. I want to do that into my 70s, if I can.
What's fun about it is that, also this year I started coaching again. Well, and that's been a big growth thing, So the head coach he might be 30 now, but he was 29. The defensive coordinator's 26.
Wow.
Jory Dotz is coaching with us. He just graduated from college. Mm-hmm. We have Jonathan Steele, who's a therapist in town, but he graduated in like 2012 or something. So it's compared to me, it's, we were talking puppies,
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty entertaining at times.
I bet.
We went all the way to the coast in a Suburban, and I'm listening to these conversations, and it's just like, it was just hilarious, actually. It was just like, I can put myself back at that point, and I'm not going, well, you guys are a little older,
for sure.
But it was just funny, but it's really good, to have that youthful, naive energy around you, and then teaching school. It's like, and so I'm kind of like, I want to get this podcast deal going with my grandson.
Uh-huh.
And, I just want to put more on my plate instead of less.
Yep.
And I feel like, it's weird when you start contemplating not doing stuff.
Yeah.
And and then physically you feel like you can't do it. It's just a weird feeling, and I can see how you can give into it. But I guess I'm saying, even though the truth of the matter is that it doesn't make any difference who says it, where it's coming from. It's a small percentage of people. Even if a person is saying, hey, you know what, you can change your life, you can revolutionize your health, still only a few people will do it.
Yeah.
So you have to be realistic. I have to be realistic in that part of it. I don't know, but for that one person who somebody else has already planted the seed and it's already on their mind and they don't know what direction to go, I guess that's really kind of why I said, hey, I'll do this podcast with you. I feel like I've always been kind of, okay, do your thing, stay in your lane, say something when you're supposed to be saying something, and don't be, I was into it. It's not like I was a wallflower, but I'm not a gregarious out there preaching to people about stuff. But I'm also at that point where I feel like, man, you know what? I feel like I've got something to say, so I'm going to say it.
That's awesome.
And not being judgmental, but I just know that it can help people. Even if all a person did was a little short workout, and even in their living room, do a few push-ups on your knees, or
that's where I started.
That exactly.
I dropped 55 pounds by doing push-ups in my living room.
Yeah, absolutely. And that builds, and just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be more disciplined and write it down. Don't, set goals. Don't set New Year's resolutions, set goals.
Yeah.
And although New Year's is a good time to reassess, and I usually take the week between Christmas and New Year's to kind of assess where I'm at. I'm kind of a make a plan, now execute the plan kind of a guy. But it's exciting, and I'm hoping that I can turn on some. And the reason I want to do it with my grandson is that the exact same thing that I would tell him, I need to be doing the exact same thing. It's no different for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, oh, okay, well, I'm an adult. I've been there.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, exactly. That's BS.
Mm-hmm.
But kids are capable of a lot more than we give them credit for too. And building some discipline into them. I mean, I love the fact that he is up. I mean, he gets up actually before I get there at 4:30. His dad and him get up and they do their devotional.
Oh, wow.
So he gets up at 3:45 in the morning, and not one time has he complained about, oh, gee, Grandpa, maybe I could, I need a break here or whatever.
Yeah.
So and what I am is fortunate that he's into it.
For sure.
But anyway, it's just awesome. I feel like blessed.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share this quote with you before we go to the next topic. I came across this, and I actually want to get a poster of it. When asked what surprised him most about humanity, the Dalai Lama answered, "Man sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. And then he is so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present. The result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he is never going to die, and then dies having never really lived."
That's awesome.
Yeah, that popped me in the mouth the first time I read it.
Yeah. That's one of it's kind of funny. It kind of ties in with that last little part of that where, I kind of feel like, what I'm on to is not anything unique. I mean, don't have the corner, on the stuff, but I feel like, I can't assure somebody that they're going to have a longer life, that they're going to live longer, but I can assure them that the quality of their life is going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to feel alive and feel like, hey, I can go for a hike or I can go for a walk. And honestly, I mean, obviously there's people who have limitations, injuries or bad hip or whatever, but it's more of an attitude shift in what can I do? And then that inflammation, there's a lot of things that you can do to minimize inflammation besides drugs, besides going to the doctor and saying, hey, I need anti-inflammatories. I mean, there's a lot of natural things that you can do. And like I take zero drugs.
Yeah.
Zero.
Well, and I'm done taking advice from overweight doctors. That's a new policy of mine.
Well, I just think that that's, I mean, and not to, I don't want to get political, but I just think that, I kind of like, not that I agree with everything that Kennedy says, but he's on to something there, I mean, we are poisoning ourselves, and it's, and you can have a little bit of that stuff, but it's like, man, if that is your diet and you think that's living, I can just tell you, I like that stuff as well as anybody, but I didn't feel alive when I was doing it.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the less of a buzz you get off of it or whatever, that rush of having your favorite meal or all that stuff is, so we're really kind of turned into food addicts, and, so it's, I like the fact that, he's saying, hey, look, we're poisoning ourselves. The statistics bear true, I mean, it's just like, we are in a healthcare crisis that's worse than our national debt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to bankrupt our country because there's so many unhealthy people and there's no preventative, nobody, up until now, nobody's out there sounding the alarm,
I think that's what bothered me most about COVID. Like, I mean, you can sit on whatever side of the fence you'd like, vaccine, not vaccine, everyone's entitled to make that decision. I think the thing that bothered me though was that the powers that be weren't really promoting like get your health in order. I mean,
right.
Whatever that is. And it was almost just the opposite. Stay home, stay isolated, alcohol sales are up, fast food sales are, it's like, man, we should have been doing just the opposite. Like get out, sunlight, exercise, and not make it political. Like it has nothing to do with left or right. It has everything to do with your health and put good things into your mouth and then go outside and get some exercise and your life will change. It's that simple.
And there's some constants there too. There's more than, I've always said that if you filled a room with dietitians and, different health professionals that are in that field, there would be a room full of differing opinions, but the thing that's true and the thing that whether you're a vegetarian or a vegan or a carnivore or you're keto or whatever, the key is to cut the junk out, cut that crap out.
Yeah.
And if you want to have something that will revolutionize your health, cut the sugar. I mean, that is the biggest thing. I mean,
I still fight that.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
But the older you get, the more, I mean, I'm doing so many different things. I can't really say, okay, I'm going to attribute it all to this, but I quit drinking energy drinks and diet pop and all that kind of stuff, but cutting the sugar is like, you don't have to be, it's universally accepted that that's what cancer feeds off of.
Yeah.
So, diabetics, we got, it's an epidemic. It really is, obesity is just rampant and it's not to say that, oh, well, those people haven't got any willpower, no discipline or anything. We've been sold this bill of goods for a long time, it's just time to get a little more discipline and go, hey, how can I eat a little more healthy?
And educated.
Yeah, just get more educated, educate yourself. That's the best education. The best education is when you get into it because you're the only one who can make those decisions. You can't have somebody telling you, hey, you need to, my mom smoked the entire time we were growing up. Smoked in the car, smoked in the house, she smoked, she wasn't like a 3-pack a day person, but a pack a day, I think. And, and my dad would go on these little jags where he's like, you know, I can still remember him taking a Kleenex and taking one of her cigarettes and putting the Kleenex on the filter, on the end of the filter, and then sucking into it and then showing her the, you know, the crap that was on the Kleenex, you know, and this is going into your lungs and all this stuff, you know. So he was always trying to get her to quit. Mm-hmm. She'd quit for a little bit, but she was always quitting for him.
Yeah.
You know, not that your loved ones should be a motivation. No doubt.
But it can't be the only thing. Yeah.
You have to be willing to make that change, and no matter what it is. But I just think people are capable a lot more than they give their self credit for.
I think so. And I think that, you know, maybe there's power in starting to empower each other again, because it's a hard thing to do on your own, you know, and I'm in no way throwing shade at anyone that's battling, you know, being overweight or obese or food. Like, I mean, I feel that I can comment on it a little bit because I've been there, you know, and I'm on the other side of it through a lot of hard work and discipline. But I think that empowerment, and, you know, I can tell you right now, if the other guys didn't show up to the gym every morning, I would have missed days.
Well, you know, but that brings you to a different, I mean, that brings up a whole different deal that ties in with that, is that when it's more important for you to show up because somebody's waiting on you, you know, there's a power in that.
Oh boy.
And you know, that's another thing that goes out the window. You know, you get to retirement age and you're tired of, you know, knuckling under to the man and you know, whatever story you want to, you know, whatever your scenario is. But a lot of it is you want to get away from that discipline. You don't want anybody telling you what to do. And you don't want anybody, you know, you don't want to be beholden to somebody, you know. And when there's somebody waiting at the gym, and that's one of the principles that we always felt like a successful team has a mentality, and this is in business too. It's when you aren't the focus, you aren't your focus, you're part of a team, you know, and you're not going to let down your teammate, you know.
It's all on you, but it's not about you.
Yeah, it's on you, but that's a perfect way of putting it. But, you know, I mean, I was thinking that earlier when you were talking about, you know, you're working out with a group, there's a power in that, man. You know, and, you know, and it's good for them and it's good for you. So, you know, a lot of times it's when you're setting up this thing for them to take advantage of. You guys are in it together. You're kind of spearheading it, but you could also bail. You could come up with all kinds of excuses, you know, but,
well, and they could too. And
sure. Absolutely.
You know,
it's just,
but I think we've built that capital with each other. And it seems like that, you know, now it's accountability, you know, and
I think that's
you're there for yourself first, but then also there for your guys.
Yeah. And that's totally awesome. I just like that, you know. I mean, and I suppose that you can get some of that same stuff out of, you know, guys who golf together or whatever, you know, but that camaraderie and that, you know, but shared sacrifice
and suffering.
Yeah.
When you suffer together,
there's a power in that. There's a power in that. And it's like a magic, you know. You know, in fact, I still do, because I'm kind of the culture guy. You know, I became kind of the culture dude, you know, with our football team now, and we're trying to rebuild the culture, and, you know, and starting fresh with new guys and stuff. So one of the things that I used before, and I used again this year, was just the acronym MAGIC.
Okay.
You know, MAGIC is make a greater individual commitment. You know, and when you do that, it's like magic. It's not magic, obviously, you know. So, but there is a power in that commitment, you know, and that commitment is to your teammates, you know. And when you're giving it up for those guys, and, you know, you see somebody go down, and then you see teammates crying after the game because they're so tore up that their buddy blew his knee out or whatever it is, you know. I mean, you know that you are on track. You're on track because they give a crap about somebody besides, you know.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be their best friend. You even see it with the young kids, you know, young kids who hardly played, you know, the season's over and they're tore up, you know. I mean, that's, you know, there's a power in that, you know, so that like you're incorporating that into at your age,
Yeah.
which is with adult males, I that's incredible. You talk about building a community, that kind of stuff goes a long ways. That shared pain, the shared sacrifice.
We've been away from it for a while, but when you look back to our ancestors, that was every day.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up and it's cold outside and you got to start a fire and you got to go hunt to get food. I mean, suffering was just every day, and that's still in our DNA.
Yeah.
But now we're living in this comfort crisis of where we've made everything so easy that we're now actually having negative repercussions because we're not suffering individually or together.
Yeah.
Like, there's something so fulfilling when you get together with 3 or 4 guys and cut a load of firewood because someone is down and out and they need a load of firewood. Like, I mean, I remember that kind of stuff more than I do the new TV showing up at my house, or, whatever these intrinsic material things are, that common, I really enjoy that about snowmobiling as well. Mm-hmm. When we're backcountry riding, like, you and I are kind of depending on each other, one for an avalanche, we're wearing transceivers. And so I'm kind of depending that if I get buried, you can get me out.
Yep.
But also, if my snowmobile breaks down, we're going to be a team, and I've been sledding the last 2 weekends, both with breakdowns where we've had to tow sleds out, and it's fun, because you got to use your brain and get creative, and you're working with 4 or 5 other guys, and you want to get back to the truck before it's dark. And, that whole thing really mentally is good for me. And I just think as a culture, we've got away from that a little bit, and I hope something like this gym idea and whatever it may be, just getting people together again. But for like common suffering, like I would love to have Saturday suffer days, and not to be extreme. Like I say that, but where we come in and it's kids and it's family, and maybe we hike up Gold Hill and come back and do some stretches and then bake some bread together, not literal, like, let me put your face in the dirt, but just doing something hard together as a community. Like, I think a little bit of that wouldn't hurt anything.
Oh, absolutely. And, I mean, I just think you're onto something there. I think that's just a really cool, that's the thing I like about it. It's funny that I came from that. I mean, what got me into coaching was a individual sport. But once that team thing, and we had, I wouldn't say when I was playing sports that I really got that, I mean, you had teammates and friends and guys that you played with and that kind of stuff. And that was, but I don't ever remember shedding a tear over, any of it, I mean, and part of that I think is just being dumb and young, but.
What's weird for me in high school sports athletics is that I actually got that most with the Colville football program.
Yeah.
So I got to play for Kettle Falls. I also got to play for Reardon. But then going into my junior year and my senior year, I worked out with Cornwell at the high school.
Yep.
And that was, if I remember right, that was 4 days a week at 6 a.m. And I'm going to say that there was between 20 and 30 kids at the high school, and you had that same amount at the fitness center. Is that right?
Yep.
And that was my first exposure to hard work as far as physical conditioning.
Yeah.
I mean, we got after it.
Oh, yeah.
At least in my brain, that's how I remember it.
Oh, you got after it. I mean, I wasn't up there except for on testing days. But that was the whole concept, was kind of a hard work, done well feels good kind of a mentality.
It was so bittersweet for me because I was building that capital with those guys for 2 months and then going to a different team.
Right.
That I hadn't, literally just showed up.
Yeah.
And so I really missed that. Probably one of the most impactful things for me as a young man, was my senior year. And, I've never dove into this really publicly before. But, I left Kettle Falls at the end of my sophomore year. And, like I said, I was just ready to work, and I was very motivated. I never drank in high school. I never got wrapped into the party scene. and I wanted to win, you know, like, and I'm going to say that I was obsessive and it wasn't a healthy relationship with that.
Right.
And again, that it's a whole nother podcast to get in the weeds, and I'll do it one day, you know, that whole move and transition. But essentially I end up at a different high school and land myself on a football team that's really good. And I earn a spot on that team, but they were stacked when I got there. And we went to play in the Tacoma Dome, which had been a goal of mine since the first time my dad took me there when I was in Pop Warner, and we got to go watch, you know, these high school teams win state championships. I remember, you know, I was probably 11 or 12 the first time we went over there. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I want to be here, and I want that so bad. That's all I could think about. And little do I know, you know, 2005, December 3rd, I'm playing in the Tacoma Dome and end up beating a really good DeSales football team 14-10 with 4 seconds to go. And there I am at the 50-yard line with a state championship trophy, and everything I'd thought about in my head for 10 years had come true. And it was such a weird thing, Mike, because it was the happiest I had been at that point in my life, and also probably one of the lowest, because I'd won a championship with a bunch of guys I didn't really know. My buddies in Kettle were, and to this day are still like my brothers, you know, they're the guys that I grew up with and played Pop Warner and junior high. And like, you know, those are my guys. They weren't there. This Colville team that I'd got to learn or get to know the summer before that season, you know, they weren't there. And I'd worked out with them for plus or minus, you know, probably 40 days throughout the summer, really hard workouts. And so I guess I learned the 10,000 foot view is I learned that winning isn't everything. And I'm so fortunate for that experience, and it's great. But dude, I don't sit at the bar and talk about the time I won state in 05, and I got a state championship ring that I've worn once or twice in my life, because it's just not, it's not what I thought it was. You know, I basically got put on a badass team. We got lucky, and I love those guys too. You know, they were good guys. My coaches are great. It was a wonderful experience to be part of. But I didn't have that suffering like I had, you know, with that Colville program that year. And so I guess where I'm going with all that was that season came to an end. We'd won state. I moved back to Kettle for the summer, and I continued to work out with Colville football going into my senior year of that summer. And it was just everything I wanted. It was this book. It was Season of Life, what you and Coach Cornwell were doing, and the other coaches. But you guys, you know, were heading that up. And I loved the whole idea of the iron sharpens iron. Your guys' scout team was dialed. You know, the way that freshmen were treated, you know, was unlike anything I'd seen. The servant leadership was apparent. And I wanted to be part of that so badly. I've realized that after I won the state championship, that it wasn't winning that I was after. It was, I wanted a tribe to be part of.
Well, I remember you actually meeting with us, and you were contemplating not going back to Reardon.
Do you remember? So that's where I'm getting with this whole thing.
Yeah.
I believe it was a week or two before season started.
Yeah.
And I met with you guys and said, I want to come play for you, and I fully understand how WIAA works, and I'm not going to be able to be on varsity, but I want to be part of your scout team because I believe that iron sharpens iron, and I just want to be part of a tribe. And I remember Coach Cornwell specifically saying to me, I don't think that's in your best interest. And I said, I disagree. You know, I want to come play for you guys, understanding that I wouldn't take a varsity snap my senior year. Because of the WIAA rules.
Right.
And what Coach Cornwell had told me was, you got to plant your own seed, and you need to build whatever is going on in Reardon, like plant that seed there and be a leader and lead from the tip of the spear. And you're committed there, and see that through, you know, and I'm not doing good justice of what he said to me, but it impacted me so hard it would have been easier for me to come to Colville than it was to stay.
Yeah.
You know, I missed the house that my dad had just built. You know, I'm living in a freaking little farm community where I know no one, you know, and my dad had just built this beautiful house on Lake Roosevelt.
Right.
I'm living in a manufactured home in Farmville with no one that I know, basically by myself, because my family's up here running the business and
Sure.
doing things. And I'm so thankful for that meeting and for the fact that he pushed me to do the hard thing, that you guys pushed me to do the hard thing, which there was a lot of lessons in that. And
Yeah, I remember that. So and you hit, you know, I mean, obviously you're paraphrasing, but that was basically exactly what he said, you know, and you know, but that's a good life lesson.
It was
right
huge.
there. I mean, think about that, you know, I mean, and I kind of go back to when I had the opportunity to go play away from town with people I didn't know, and how scary that was. And at that point, I had no clue about what was the potential of a football team, you know?
Yeah.
And the power in that. But, you know, it would, if nothing else, it just would have been a positive experience, you know, and getting out of your comfort zone. And yeah. And sometimes it's not going to be, hey, I'm with all my buddies, you know, and, you know,
there was so much
kumbaya,
value in
you
me
know.
showing up on day one in Weatherman, not meaning shit, you know, in a small
Yeah,
town,
absolutely.
you know, I'm 5 generations deep here, and to show up and to actually have to earn friendship and time, you know, a varsity spot and, you know, all of these things with who you are as a person and not what your name is or, you know, how you're identified. Like, dude, I don't think I would have ever gone to Montana or to Colorado or you know, I worked for a company where we traveled the US. Like if I wouldn't have gone to Reardon and stayed, I think it would have been very easy for me to stay here forever. And I got to choose to come back.
Yeah.
And I want to be here now. And I love this place. And, you know, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I had to go see the world to appreciate it, you know, and I'm choosing to be here now.
Right.
And, I'm thankful that I had that opportunity. You know, I wouldn't go back and change any of that.
Yeah.
You know, it was pretty special.
That's, you know, I mean, you know, that's something that I can say. I mean, you know, obviously you have regrets about things, you know, and most of mine are just people that I probably didn't treat the best or, you know, that kind of thing. You know, I mean, I feel like, man, it's unfortunate that happened, but I really, honestly, I probably wouldn't change a thing just because it's sort of like those movies where, you know, you go back in the past and then you change this one thing and then it just changes the whole dynamic of things, you know, but it's interesting. Just, I mean, I just like that, you know, this conversation because I'm sitting here thinking, you know, he experienced exactly what I could have experienced. I chose not to. I don't spend any time really thinking about like, whoa, I mean, I wish I would have done that, you know, but like I said earlier, and I don't blame them. At the time I was appreciative that they didn't make me do it, but in hindsight, you know, as an adult in, you know, that adversity and that getting out of your comfort zone and that, you know, I mean, there's just, you know, you talk about building mental muscle. I mean, that's a start, you know, so you might look at that like, man, this is an adversity going down here away from my friends and the buddies that I worked out with and grew up with and, you know, whatever, but it made you who you are, you know, and you have an appreciation of that, you know, and, you know, who knows, you know, I mean, who knows, somebody might be listening to this thing down the road and go, wow, I never looked at it like that. You know, I need to make that call, you know, I mean, they might be struggling with whatever, a decision, and they're afraid, you know, but
I think the lesson that I took from that was, and I hadn't really understood it at all prior, was the idea of delayed gratification. And I remember Cornwell saying like, hey, just because you plant a seed doesn't mean that you see it blossom into a flower.
Right.
That could take years. You might not even ever see it, but you should still plant it. Yeah. That's still a worthwhile endeavor, and you should still water it. And you should still care for it.
Yeah.
And it may not ever grow into anything, but it's almost your duty to do that because you have the tools, you have the seed, and you should get that thing in the dirt.
Yeah.
And I think that was such an impactful lesson to learn as a 17-year-old man of like delayed gratification, you know, and I look at kids now in this generation, and instant gratification is such a thing. You know, we get so many dopamine hits with our cell phones and this, and I mean, it still blows my mind that we can order something from Amazon and it's here the next day. You know, I mean, and that delayed gratification, you know, it took me 2.5 years to lose that weight that I lost. Right. And it was like that same thing though, plant the seed, you know, with discipline and these other things and endeavors that I try. I always think about it's my duty to plant the seed if I have it, and maybe it doesn't go anywhere or do anything. And I got to learn that at a young age because of Colville football. I mean, what a cool lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's, and you know, you don't really, you know, I still run into kids, you know, I mean, that we coached that I can't even remember their name sometimes, you know, I mean, it was just totally embarrassing.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's so obvious that you had an impact on their life, you know, that, I mean, it was a big deal to them. And, you know, after you coach hundreds and hundreds of kids, it's like certain ones obviously stick out, but a lot of times it's that kid that was kind of on the fringe that wasn't the star. He wasn't, you know, maybe he didn't even finish football, but his sophomore and junior year, maybe he was on JV or whatever, but somehow their memory of it is way bigger deal than, you know, you remember it being, you know, and so it always kind of blows me away, you know, and there is that delayed gratification, you know, or when a kid calls you up and goes, man, you know, I never really got what you were talking about.
Well, I feel like especially then, with young men, like your brain just isn't developed. Like a lot of those lessons, you know, everything I just said, I didn't learn till 10 years after that. You know, it was just, and, you know, I'm sure that has to be true with you guys and coach. You guys have coached 20 years worth of young men in this area. Yeah. And I bet the light doesn't go off till years after they've left the program. Yeah. But it's still worth doing, right? All the sacrifice and the time. And like, I mean, that's something I always looked up to. You guys put in so much time. Like, is it safe to say that when I was there working out with you guys, there was 40 to 50 kids and 4 to 6 coaches every morning at 6 a.m.? Is that a fair number?
You know, I'm not positive how many were actually at the high school. I know there was one at the gym, you know, and I had 25 kids down there. Yeah. But I know the commitment.
But I remember, like, there was Carp
the
and
staff.
Gum and Brad and, you know, Randy and like,
you know, and they're in the mix, you know. You know, Brad used to be right in there working out, and Gum was working out.
Yeah.
And,
I was in Brad's lifting group.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the other thing is that camaraderie, that feeling. You know, it's been kind of cool because Brad is on this new staff, and him and I would ride to the games together. You know, bring my grandson, and he was the ball boy. You know, the younger grandson, and you know, and it's not so much making these new memories now as, you know, I can't help but reflect just on how many cool people that I got to meet, parents, and, you know, I mean, delayed gratification thing is like when a kid graduates, and I'm not big on going to graduation parties, but I've been to a few. And when a parent says, we did it, you know, I mean, they know that we're able to get, you know, there's a special spot when you build a relationship outside of the family dynamic, you know, the parent dynamic.
Yeah.
And so we can get kids to do things that their parents are, I mean, we could say the same thing. It's different coming from us, you know, and, but, you know, it's not that recognition isn't the reason you're doing it. But when you get it, it's like, wow, you know, that's cool. Yeah. You know, you impacted a family, not just the kid, you know, and, but I just think about the relationships I built with a lot of those kids and coaches, and, you know, the opportunities that were been given to me as a result of that, you know, the byproduct stuff, you know, and, you know, I mean, I'm coaching right now just as a result of that, you know, and, you know, knowing your dad really well. And, you know, it's just, you know, it's pretty cool. It's just pretty cool. And it really is the relationship thing.
Yeah.
You know, back to your
original.
opener, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and I guess to piggyback that, I actually spoke with Coach Cornwell this morning and just said, "Hey, I'm having Mikey on, and you got any input or anything to bring up, or whatever." And I mean, he was so ecstatic to hear that we were getting together, and he told me to tell you hi,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But he just said, what people wouldn't understand in the community is how important you were and how much behind the scenes you were to that whole program. Just the little things that were so big that you did. And then he also told me about a story. I think he said it was your guys' third year of coaching together, and it wasn't going great. Mm-hmm. And he was really frustrated with how things were going. And I think that he was dropping you off at your house, and you guys were sitting in the driveway talking in his vehicle, and he was just like...
We were actually outside the gym.
Okay.
Sitting in his pickup outside on the north side of the gym.
Yeah. And he was kind of kicking the can down the road. And he said, whatever you told him before you got out, he goes, it completely changed my whole attitude. He said, Mike has this inherent gift to be able to get into someone's mind and positively impact them and inspire them to get to their full potential. And he said, basically, that's what had happened after your guys' conversation. And then that's when the work started getting done.
Well, what that led to was really, basically I just talked him down, from, he was ready to hang it up. Yeah. But what that led to, and I don't remember exact conversation, but what it led to was I just said, the most important thing is to surround ourselves with people smarter than us, and I said, I think what we need to do is we need to have a meeting and put all the cards on the table, no sacred cows, And at that time, Ken Emil was the former head coach, and there was, anytime there's a change in coaches, and there's hard feelings and kind of a jealousy kind of stuff, back and forth, and I don't know. There was, it wasn't that they were enemies or anything like that. It's just that Randy wanted to do his thing. Ken still thought he was, should be the man, and had had something to say, and so. But what was interesting was that Ken had he bought into the double wing. And at that time it was, I can't think of the name of the coach, but it was Air Force Academy was running a double wing. And so Ken was experimenting with that and running it some with our freshmen, but he wasn't part of the varsity staff. And at that time, this is in the early kind of the dark days of our program. At that time, the freshmen were a completely separate deal.
Gotcha.
They weren't really incorporated into the fold, so to speak. They were just, looks like glorified 8th grade.
Yep.
And it was just 9th grade. You really weren't part of the football team yet, And so anyway, I said, I think we need to have a meeting, and just hear him out. And, and it's one of the things I really admired about Randy was that he just, I love that guy. He is like a brother to me.
Yeah.
There's nobody I respect more, than him. But he swallowed his pride, and accepted to having this meeting and was receptive to hearing him out. And then we, as we did all the time, we spent so many hours just batting ideas back and forth and having conversations. And anyway, Ken just made some really strong points about, that offense fitting our kids better than a pro style, opened up, typical offense. And it was like, man, we need to go with this, And so he came on, he actually hired him as the offensive line coach, and we started doing the double wing.
Wow.
And that really, honestly, that played a big part in getting us going. So at the same time, we're building this culture and this work ethic and building kids up, turning them into better athletes, physically.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he was open to, saying, hey, I'm going to eat crow here, and say, yeah, let's do it, and that was huge. I mean, and a huge growth for him. And it turned out to be awesome for the football team. The other thing was that Ken was I don't remember how many years he coached with us, but then when it was time for him to move on, and I don't really remember the dynamics of that, but Randy said, okay, I'm going to take over the offensive line. And that was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, because he was a quarterback in high school and college, and he took over that offensive line. And we used to have this thing. I was always kind of talking, hey, we need to be black belt. This can't just be, and so we had this shared philosophy that, we're not going to be scratching crap in the dirt and, on the fly kind of, oh, hey, well, maybe we could do this.
You're going to run a tight ship.
Yeah, we're going to run it. Yeah, it's a system. And he really held to that, big time. But what was cool was that he took on that challenge and became, by the time he retired, I think hands down, if there was a better offensive line coach in the state of Washington, I don't know who it was. And I always tell people, go, wow, you going to be this year? And I said, well, we're kind of rebuilding and reloading. We have some pretty good skill guys, but it's going to be, our team goes as our offensive line goes. Our offense goes, and we put value in that and built those kids up. And it was really, hey, everybody has a job, do your job. And Randy just perfected it. And he would, every clinic, and he just immersed himself, which I could totally appreciate that whole, kind of edge, that he had with that. And, and so the double wing evolved, and he became really adept at adjusting, when depending on our personnel, what kind of a kid you had at quarterback and all that, and so it went from a deal where it was a fullback eccentric dominated offense. Our run game was a lot of misdirection, but the fullback was really the key guy. I mean, he was the kid that ran it the first year was Kelly Brown. He had our rushing record for I don't know how long. Off a fullback, and so he's like this far from the quarterback. And then we're telling him, you come out of your stance like you got turpentine running down the crack of your butt, and it was just an explosive type of deal. Well, then it evolved, so by the end we're running out of a pistol type of, shotgun type of a set, and we're still running the ball and misdirection. And I mean, it was just really cool to see, and just seeing him take on that challenge and become, a legitimate, really, really good offensive line coach. Plus he just those guys worked their ass off, I was always either, and still am, either quarterback or running back coach. And we're overdoing our stuff, and I'm looking over there going, oh my God, those, these linemen are taking their steps and they're, it's just drill after drill. And he's just drilling the fundamentals into them, to make them black belt. And it was just awesome. It was just really, really awesome.
I love the phrase, brilliant in the basics.
Yep.
I think, and I see that with high school football a lot. I feel like, is that, to your point, when you guys were running more of that open offense, like we watch these college or NFL games and then expect these young athletes to perform like that, where if you can be brilliant in the basics and know your assignment and own the man across from you, that was one of the things at Reardon that I always appreciated. We ran the same play to open every single offensive series of the game, and our play call was unbalanced right. We ran a double tight, and unbalanced as we would shift a guard over. So it was called unbalanced right, killer right. And it was just a student body to the right. So it was a full house, and we would hand it to the tailback, and everyone went right. And coach's philosophy was there's 11 of us and there's 11 of them. and we need to pick up 3 yards to establish that we're dominant.
Yeah.
And it was the bi-county league. So there's 8 teams in that league, and everyone knew that that's what was coming first play of the game. So it was completely this mental thing of, you know what's coming, and we're still going to get 3 yards.
And that's true when I coached wrestling, and I had several guys that were mentors, collegiate wrestlers, and Kevin Knight, who was our superintendent now in Colville, was a great high school collegiate wrestler and coach. And then, some other guys, but basically, one of the guys told me, he said, just focus on the basics. It's really all that tricky crap will, it'll work against the lesser team.
Yeah.
And it's true in football. You're going to pull off these trick plays and all this stuff, but the basic stuff is what's going to win championships.
Yeah.
And so wrestler, this guy said, if a guy's really good at the basics, he can go out there against a good guy and say, I'm going to take you down with a single leg, and there is not a thing you can do about it, And, so he knew how to set him up.
Yep.
And knew how to, he had it perfected, and you'd just see it. And you'd see it at the state tournament all the time. The guys that were, the guys that won were just really, really good, period. But they weren't doing any tricky stuff. They were just going out there just kicking ass, it was really cool.
Yeah.
But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I got a few questions to wrap up. I feel I didn't get everything on here, but I think we're going to have to do a couple podcasts.
Yeah.
I think you got to come back, and I want to do a podcast just on the Colville football program and really go deep into that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can go on and on about that.
And I wouldn't be opposed. I'm looking at getting a third mic set up. Be cool to maybe talk Cornwall to come in too. And
that would be great.
That'd be really neat.
That'd be awesome.
So we'll go back into that, but to wrap up here, what, if anything, do you say to 18-year-old Mike?
I would say do a better job of picking the people that you admire.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that everybody that I admired, but I tended to lean towards a little bit more of a crazy, just kind of, people who I wouldn't say were great influences necessarily,
Yeah.
And I'm just talking about, and I'm not saying that they were bad people or anything, but, I'm just a huge believer in, you become who you hang out with and who you emulate. And, and I really, took me a little while to kind of get my bearings there, but I had some good, and I had some good older mentors,
Yeah.
Which helped, but the younger ones were not a good influence
For sure.
The other thing that I would say, and I tell this to people all the time, is that if you've got a son, know who his friends are, and if that friend has older brothers, then cinch it up. You need to be aware of what's going on, because all of my friends had older brothers, and I thought they were the greatest, but they were nothing but bad influences. We were doing stuff that we shouldn't have been doing at an age that we shouldn't have been doing it.
Yep.
And, that, and I know stuff is going to happen, and we made it through it, and, and we had some good times and all that stuff. But I look back and I some of the stuff that we did and the route that I could have gone, like we were talking briefly before we started, about the drinking thing,
Absolutely.
And, smoking pot and all that kind of stuff, is, that can just, I have friends now that are gone, that made bad decisions, whose marriages blew up, and then basically bled out because they were, they chose alcohol over their wife, their whole family situation. It was like, nobody thinks that stuff's going to happen, but
Until you're looking down the barrel.
man, I'll tell you what, and there's just nothing good about it. I mean, if you can do it in moderation, but if you're like me, I've never been an in moderation guy, which is good if it's in a positive setting. But when it comes to, like I said before, I don't drink because I was good at it.
Yeah. Sure.
I could pound them.
Yeah.
I mean, even the kid, in fact, this is kind of dumb, but the guy that I'm talking about that bled out, him and I used to be drinking buddies, and he would go, "What in the heck are you doing with those things?" And he accused me of just throwing them over my shoulder. I didn't guzzle, but I just gulp, And so I was always a 2 or 3 beers to one guy,
Yeah.
And, but anyway, every stupid thing that I did, I mean, talk about regrets. I mean, it's like, I wasn't mean, but, it just nothing positive comes from that,
I hear you there.
So I don't know about the 18-year-old part, but, but.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good. What about and it could just be anything, but if you had to recommend a book, what's one that pops up? What's a book that you enjoy or that you think maybe people listening to this, if they made it this far and what we've talked on and whatnot, what's a book you think that you would recommend?
Man, I've read so many books that, it kind of depends on what direction they're trying to go, but, I think I don't think you can go wrong with any of the Wooden books. And I know that that's dated, but any of the Wooden books are just solid.
And for people listening, that's Coach John Wooden, who coached at UCLA.
Yeah. He won like 10 straight national championships, and I mean he's just a legend. He's been passed away for quite a few years now, but. I would say any of the Wooden books. The Season of Life is a great one if you have kids who are in sports or athletics, and it's just a good book for a man to read. And it's like we kind of hit on it. It's challenging, because it goes against the.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Male machismo is, this guy's a man, but it kind of goes against that. Male machismo kind of a
absolutely.
thing, and I enjoy I'd say anything from even though you have to put it in the context that this isn't like, why would I read that? I don't want to be a Navy SEAL, but the Jocko, his stuff is really good.
Yeah,
his podcasts are good. I'm not, I'm kind of drawing a blank. I've read so many, I've read so many books. I have, 4 books on my nightstand, but honestly, I've kind of recycled some, and literally what's on my nightstand right now are 2 John Wooden books. I'm doing that John Wooden devotional thing that I do every morning, and then Season of Life,
cool.
And so, and part of that is just, I'm kind of at a place where it's like, hey, you know what? Go with what works.
Yeah.
And I know that works. So a lot of it is just refreshing, kind of rejuvenating some things that
absolutely
that were really important, at the time I was coaching before. Now I'm coaching again and teaching school, and and so a lot of it is just interrelational stuff. Another book that's really good, and this is one that seems like, what the heck would I want to read that for? But I'm trying to think. This guy, oh gosh, I can't think of his name. I'll have to get back to you on that. But it's basically, it's not the Horse Whisperer, but this guy is, and I don't know why I can't think of his name, but the very first clinic that Randy and I went to together, we were in Pullman, And his father-in-law, who's been gone for a long time now, gave him this book. And he was telling me, and I can still remember the conversation. We're sitting there waiting to go into this clinic at WSU. And Horse Sense for People is the name of it. Horse Sense for People. And I can't think of the author, but I'll get back to you on that. But if you Googled Horse Sense for People, and then he had another follow-up to that, and I can't remember what the name of that is, but both of those were really, really good. And, it was like a horse-oriented thing, but how he read horses and then how he related it to people and relationships, and, and the whole deal is kind of gentling horses instead of breaking them.
Okay.
So you can kind of see where that might be going. You're not breaking a human being either. I mean, you're dealing with humans. So that was a pretty impactful. And ironically, on a side note on that, is just by reading those books, I got an understanding of horses better. And so, like, Cornwell used to have a little ranch.
I remember his place out there.
Yeah. And they had horses. And so Wayne Bell, another friend of ours, and Randy and I, at least once a year, would go for a horseback ride. Well, those guys both rode quite a bit more than me, but I just understood, not to get on that horse and be nervous, and, just knowing just kind of being, just understanding how to connect with them.
For sure.
And it's just kind of, it amazes me to this day that it was like so relevant to that.
Yeah.
And then it was one of those things that we tapped into, just in relationships. Another person that was hugely impactful for me was Frosty Westring. And he has a book called Make the Big Time Where You Are. Now, he's passed away, but he was he was PLU's, Pacific Lutheran College's football coach for years, legendary coach. And I immersed myself in his program and had the opportunity to, a kid from Colville went there, and I kind of tapped in. This was kind of in the earlier days of our program. I mean, we kind of started turning the corner, but still building that culture thing. And I was just looking for, things that made sense and felt right, And so his whole deal was really kind of, in a nutshell, more of the, something that I had adopted when I was competing years before, but it's enjoy the process.
Yeah.
It's the process is it's that everyday grind is life.
I'm just starting to learn this.
Yeah. And so his whole deal was, it's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's the, so it was the, kind of like in Christian circles, it's the narrow road, not the wide road.
Yeah.
It's not the road that everybody's on, but it's kind of like be your best self, kind of, in his terms was best self, which, I still use. I mean, best self is my go-to thing. It's just that it's just a simple, 2 words.
Yep.
But it's the reminder for me, be your best self, give it your best, best shot, and so he had a ton of stuff, and then was super influential with me. And he was gracious as all get out, I was able to be in their locker room and on the sideline a couple times. And this kid that was going there, his dad kind of turned me on to, and again, this is stuff that we can get into when we talk about football, but like we had Thursday night dinners.
Yeah.
Well, the Thursday night dinners were a hog feed, basically. The parents, out of the goodness of their heart, all get together and they bring this big potluck, thing. And then the kids would come down to the cafeteria, and there was no program. There was no, there were tables and stuff, but half the time some of them didn't have their shirt on,
Yeah.
and they just hog out and leave, so I got exposed to this thing, and they used to have these things called afterglows. So regardless of where they were at, if it was a home game or an away game, it was a away game, they did it in the stands after the game. if it was a home game, they did it in their field house, but it was like family and all the players, family, and they'd have like a couple coaches speak, and then they'd have a couple of the kids speak, and then they did some attaways. That's where the attaways came from. Attaways came from that, you know, and to give you, that was another one of those uncomfortable things. When we started attaways, that was obviously, I'm going, we need to do that. And it's basically an attaway is like a team ups kind of thing, you know, and Mace is doing it with the little kids now.
Shada's doing it with softball.
Yeah. And that came, I literally did that. Randy's got a grandson who's probably pushing 30 now. And when he was a little kid, I'd have him on my shoulders, and I led every single attaway just because everybody was too intimidated or too inhibited.
Yep.
You know, because it's another one of those things that, you know, is kind of corny, I guess, but the kids
I loved it.
To it. Oh,
when I was lifting with you guys, I wanted to attaway so bad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like a big deal, you know? And so anyway, the attaways came from that. All kinds of good stuff. So anyway, then we had 3 other kids that ended up going to PLU as a result of, you know, kind of being exposed to that. And then, you know, and then I was kind of like an unofficial recruiter in a way, you know, because I just thought the program was good for kids. But so anyway, Meet the Big Time Where You Are. Randy used to read that in his health class every year.
Okay.
He read the whole book. He'd read, you know, a chapter, you know, kind of, or part of a chapter every day, and kind of teach on it, but just some basic stuff. And it's a real easy read. It's like, I mean, you know, you pick the book up and you could read it in a weekend.
Cool.
You know, easy. But, so those would be
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, those are good ones. And then, I think maybe do you have any kind of a rough ETA for when you're going to have your podcast up and going? Do you got a target date on that or
no
goal? I mean,
as soon as possible. I'm still kind of sorting things out. I want to do some instructional things. Like I want to do some workout videos where basically it shows us literally doing what we're doing, and then I have a system of tracking that is like I say, it's like goal setting every single day. So by knowing what you're doing, knowing what you did. So I mean, it's a system anyway.
Yeah.
So I want to do some instructional things with that. And so soon, hopefully soon.
Cool.
I still haven't really figured out exactly, you know, when we actually do this, where we're going to do it for sure. And, you know, but we're definitely going to do it.
Let's, you know, maybe we'll tentatively plan once you get up and going with yours, come back on. I want to dive into, there was 2 things here that I still would love to dive in on, and then we can talk about, and, you know, to anyone listening to this one, expose them to your podcast,
absolutely.
You know, and pump it out that way.
Right.
Mike, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming in today. And I've really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And, even more than that just the last 20 years, like I said, I think it's fair to say that you planted a seed in me at 15 years old. And,
that's cool.
You know, here I am, man, at 35, and I'm trying to take that seed that you planted, and I got more, and it's going out. And, I'm thankful for that. And, you know, I think to how we started this podcast, the relationships, right? And so I'm just honored to have this relationship, and I'm honored that you would come in and be on this podcast and chat with me. And so I appreciate it. And it's been good, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do it. And hopefully I have a tendency to kind of, when I'm into something, you know, I know that you can tell. I don't know if that picks up on a situation like this, but sometimes I have a tendency to just kind of get on a tangent and, you know, so, and that's part of the reason why I want to do a podcast, is that, you know, I just to have, you know, there were a few times today that I forgot we were literally recording this, you know, which is what I want to do. I like that conversational kind of idea. And, And I think it's awesome that you're doing it, and appreciate the whole motive.
Cool.
It's cool. It's really cool.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Well,
all right.
With that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll do it again here soon.
All right. Sounds good.